I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer-owner of Gow's Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so we've never have left the town limits. So we're looking to build this location. We had lots of opportunity to potentially look at outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, we're talking about lots of small communities, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some strong investment opportunities for sure.
My name is Joey Richard. I come from Quebec, Montreal. I've studied opera at the Montreal Conservatoire of Music, so this is where I've learned about Italian, the language, and the food. And my passion just became bigger and bigger for food. I've been cooking for 20 years, almost. I opened a family business, but the only thing I forgot is that my family is still in Montreal, so I'm like, I'm trying. I make new friends. I'm building this thing, but it is a family business here. My chef is like my brother. His wife is like my sister. So I recreated a family environment. We do the real recipes, starting from the real ingredients. And for Italian food, what the secret is, few ingredients and very fresh. So each recipe would be like 3-4 ingredients maximum. But it's just the best ingredients and makes it so delicious. If you think that it's impossible to have your own business, I'm the living proof that it is possible. People want us to thrive. We work together. So everybody helps each other. If you want to be part of a community, it is the community to be part of.
My name is Joel Holland. I'm the owner and operator of 902 Athletics. I found the opportunity, started this gym in my parents' garage, and now we are currently in an 8,600 square foot facility. A lot of people come here because of the community. The things that we offer here are different than a normal gym. It's an open atmosphere where you come in, the music's played over the loudspeakers, not in your ears. You don't put earbuds in and just walk around from one machine to the other. You focus on yourself, but at the same time you get to meet new people. We have 3 floors, which we do CrossFit, boot camps, athletic training, and personal training. We have so many other businesses that are growing our economy and feeding into it becoming more populated, a place where people actually stay as opposed to leave. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and a lot of people are on the same push to become a better Bridgewater. I love this place. It's my home, and there is no other place that I would want my business to be.
Good evening, everyone. I'll call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. And as always, the town of Bridgewater is located in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are privileged to be here. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda. Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Then we'll go right down to announcements. I hope everyone who looked at the eclipse had their eclipse glasses on today. Thank you to Donna Hatt, who ran around Town Hall sharing her pair. So a few of us got to see the eclipse, which was cool. So that was kind of neat. Any other, I know we have an announcement for an event coming up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Mitchell. So this coming weekend, we have the South Shore Expo at our Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center. So that starts Friday evening, runs Saturday and Sunday. So it's everything from home renovators, builders, we have sports, and we have a travel trade show, so you don't want to miss it. You can get a weekend pass or admission, I believe is $5. Kids are free. So you can check that out this weekend.
Perfect, at the LCLC, that's great. Any other announcements from folks? No, all right. Well, we got a long meeting, so we'll just continue on ahead, and we're down to delegations. Oh no, I was going to ask Donna Hatt to come up and talk about Saltscapes.
Why, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening. For the first time ever, Bridgewater will be making its inaugural debut at Saltscapes Expo, which is a travel and food celebration of Atlantic Canada in Halifax. So, not September. It is April 19th to 21st. We have a number of businesses that will be supporting us and participating in the celebration of Bridgewater as we sip, savor, and celebrate all that we have to offer in our 125th anniversary year. So we'll also be partnering with the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. Again, in order to get to Bridgewater, you have to pass through various communities, including our surrounding and neighboring counties. So we'll be collaborating with them, but most importantly, celebrating all that we have to offer, and again, having other businesses participate with us so that they can have that experience of being present, to being celebrated by those who are attending. It is probably the largest attended event like this in Atlantic Canada, and Saltscapes is pleased to have us there this year. So for those of you who might be passing through Halifax and want to sip, come with a designated driver, because you might be sipping and sampling a little bit over the top by the time you finish. But in any case, we will be making our presence known there, and look forward to inviting those who come to that show to come join us here in Bridgewater for our 125th anniversary. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for all your effort putting that together for us. So now we are down to delegations, and we have Shanna Jodry here from Detail Event and Design Studio to talk about a proposed event coming up in the summer.
Hello, I'm not quite as enthusiastic as Donna, but I will try my best. So good evening, Mayor Mitchell and Town Council. It's very nice to be here this evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shanna Jodry. I am the co-owner of Snaptastic Photo Booths. We are a 1972 Volkswagen van, and we offer photo booth services. Sorry, I'm really nervous. And the owner of Details Event and Design Studio. So we've been working within the town of Bridgewater for the last 9 years. And we specialize in wedding services, so coordination, decorating, planning, as well as decor and prop rentals to the general public. So I find myself here this evening after attending an economic development meeting that Donna had actually put on, I think it was the end of January, beginning of February. It was held at King Street Brewery. And we were talking about the town of Bridgewater, its 125th, and how businesses could get involved in, having some sort of events within the town. And throughout the meeting, I was sitting there and I was like, how can details get involved? You know, we specialize in weddings. I don't know what the right fit would be. And I said, well, why not put on what we're known for and that be a special fine dining dinner event? And then I was thinking, well, the town wants to bring people back to the river, what the river is known for here in Bridgewater. And I was thinking, how can we do that? Well, why not have a 3-course fine dining dinner on the bridge? And so I started thinking about this. I went home that night, started sending some emails out to the local vendors that I work with in the community, and everybody was really excited about the idea. We thought, you know, how much better can you get to being closer to the river than dining right on top of it? So I find myself here tonight to tell you a little bit about what we'd like to do in hopes that maybe we could partner with the town of Bridgewater and potentially be able to do this on the bridge. So that was a great intro right there. After talking with my staff, we thought that we would play off the role of dinner en blanc, and what that is, it's a white dinner, a themed dinner where everyone wears white and all the decor and everything is white. I'm going to try my best at using this thing here. So I've just put together a few slides to show the overall concept of what we would like to do, and these are the best examples I could find in terms of what this could look like. Essentially, what we would like to do is line the bridge with tables and chairs, everything white, white flowers. I'm working with caterers right now and determining a meal that could play off of the overall theme as well. And essentially what we're trying to do is create an exclusive and unique dining experience. So this would be a 3-course meal. We're hoping that it would start around 6:30 and that would take us till about 9:30. We don't want to rush anything. During the meal, that's still to be determined, but we're also hoping to serve wine and potentially beer as well. The overall idea of this also comes after moving back to Bridgewater from being away. I lived in Toronto for 10 years, and while in Toronto, I was able to attend a lot of amazing events there. And when I came home, I have a lot of people saying, well, there's nothing to do in Bridgewater. And I think that, you know, we have, with my experience and with what my business offers now, that I feel as though we're at that point in time where we can execute this to its fullest. So the other good thing about this event is that we will be supporting local entrepreneurs and small businesses within the area. So a few of the vendors that we have on board and that are on hold currently are Sweet and Saucy Catering, Tulip Wood, they do florals within the Lunenburg area. Buchanan House of Music, we have a quartet on hold to come and play live entertainment. Petite Riviere Winery, Winchester Disposal Services, I contacted them simply for the fact I'd like to have white porta potties. Bull Point Estates, they're one of our vendors that we work with down, I guess, in Bull Point, and they're supplying us with chair rentals. Darwin Event Group and Maritime Tents. Maritime Tents are one of our preferred suppliers, and we work with them very regularly, and they're in talks with us and potentially rolling carpet out over the floor of the bridge to help us support that. And Snaptastic Photo Booth, obviously I mentioned that co-owners with that. We'd like to have our photo booth on site as well to give people a little something extra to do, and then of course ourselves. We've also reached out to Allison Clemens, the Health Foundation, because we would very much like to make this not only an event for Details to put on for the local community, but we're also looking at making this potentially an annual fundraising event for Details to give back to the community. So we really want to be able to support our local health services. More particularly, we're looking the mental health is a big thing for my staff and I, and we're hoping that we can support them in some way. And also, after talking with Allison, we thought that this could be a good opportunity for anyone not able to make the event that could potentially purchase tickets for the local health services staff to go out and enjoy an evening on the bridge. So essentially, everything I've explained. We're looking at creating a white dinner event, everything with the theme of white, entertainment for all to enjoy with a quartet as well as our photo booth. And of course, this kind of all is happening because of Canada's, yes. Getting ahead of myself there for Canada Day, but for Bridgewater's 125th celebration. And I did do a little mock-up actually of what this could potentially look like. In the case you want to know, the bridge could hold 456 people. And myself, I see the bridge being completely packed. I mean, the number I had in my mind was 300. However, as talking to Donna, we would like to try to get that 125. And we do, the top plan that you'll see there, it does allow for 136. So in the case that we have any supporters or sponsorships, we do have a few extra seats that we can provide to them. So tonight I come to you with an ask that we be able to allow this event to happen on the bridge. I know that's a big ask because the bridge would have to be shut down. But that's what I'm asking, to see if we can actually have this happen within the town. So thank you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and obviously work with the town to kind of make this happen.
Perfect, thanks. Questions from members of council? Councilor McDonald?
Do you have an idea of how much time is involved in the setup? Like how much time you would need the bridge closed kind of in total?
Yeah, so I've been looking at that. A rough estimate right now would be around 1, 2 o'clock. It depends on how much we would have to lay down on the bridge. So I'm in talks of potentially having to put either metal wood down first and then carpet. Right. So if that was the case, I would need a little bit more time. In terms of if the event went till 9:30, we would need to obviously have enough time for that to come up. So I'm anticipating probably around 11:30, 12 o'clock, just in order to have that all lit up. I mean, the one good thing about the bridge too is it does have lighting, so that's one of the other benefits of having it there. Oh, and I should also mention, I didn't say this, the day of the event would be June 14th. That's Friday, June 14th.
Other questions from council? Councilor Caldwell?
I love the idea. So the goal is 125. If there's interest, could it be more people, or is it a hard 125?
No, it could be more interest. I mean, right now, those are the numbers that we're quoting with, and I'm working within my budget. There is the potential of going, back to, I think our biggest fixed cost is just trying to figure out what the flooring of the bridge would look like to be able to hold our tables and chairs. But there is a potential of increasing that number if the interest is there.
Other questions from council? Councilor Thorburn?
Do you have any price range that you're going to charge for tickets? I'm sure there'll be lots of pre-sale prior to.
Yeah, so as of right now, the ticket sales, we're looking at being around $200, with $50 of that going to the charity, to the Health Foundation.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Conklin?
Just the obvious, rain or shine?
Rain or shine. Well, if it rained, no, we wouldn't be able to do it there, but I am currently in talks with the Cook's Farm in terms of being able to move the event there.
Okay. I like the idea of having it on the bridge itself. But
Yeah.
what about, would it be possible maybe to look at moving it to the following day if there was a better
I mean, I would
forecast,
be
or
up to that. I just don't know
that's
logistically.
part of, yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off there. But I would be totally open to doing that. I just don't know logistically what that would be with respects to the town, if that would be an option.
Yeah.
Saturday probably would be easier to accommodate the traffic than supper time Friday. So that we will be funneling, there's some logistics that would have to be worked out in terms of alternative routes for traffic. It's peak hour traffic for the town right then and there, so it'd be cutting one access point off for getting to the other side of town that we'd have to be aware of. The other thing is we don't own the bridge. So the Department of Transportation is the owner of the bridge, so we would have to scope out what, if any, concerns they would have, if any, and what their requirements may be insurance-wise and that type of thing. And lastly, I do believe the request is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we would do the in-kind piece in terms of the road closure and the barricades and the people hours required to be there at the barricades to make sure traffic doesn't try to come onto the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's, we anticipate, I think, when we had discussed this, that it's over the 500, it's probably closer to the $1,000, $3,000 range, sorry, that we'd be looking at for in-kind costs, because there's a lot of overtime for staff to provide after 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon, so for the takedown piece. So that's the in-kind request that would be asked, and that'd be staff time. But I'd say, you know, if council's agreeable to that, it's still the Department of Transportation and what may be required there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that they were meeting this week to discuss that.
I believe our Director of Engineering is going to be meeting with them to determine what they may require.
Okay.
Councilor Collins, did you have a? Yeah, just a question, given that it may be easier to accommodate on a Saturday, is it possible to move it to plan it for the Saturday instead of the Friday, or?
It is
No.
possible. I guess the reasoning for us choosing the Friday was more so, I know myself on a Friday evening, I'm getting off work, I'm more apt to want to go out afterwards, whereas a lot of, I mean, I'm also speaking from a mother's point of view. On the weekends and Saturdays, I'm usually running around with my son, and by the time I get home at the end of the day, I'm not really wanting to go back out to do anything else. So we thought maybe there might be a bigger draw for people to come out on a Friday night than a Saturday. Again, I'm willing to work with the town to make it happen.
That was my question.
Okay.
I guess if there was an alternative date,
Mhm.
if Plan B, I guess, yeah.
Other questions?
And of course, sorry if I could just
Yeah.
say too, I would just have to confirm that too with the rest of the vendors to make sure, because we are starting to get into our wedding season. So in terms of like the caterers and those people, I would just have to confirm that they still are available.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So normally what we do when we receive a delegation is it comes back to council, gives us some time to, if we think of more questions, we'll reach out.
For sure.
It gives Director of Engineering a chance to speak to the province about the
Great.
bridge, and then comes back and we'll make a decision.
Great,
Right.
thank you. May I ask how long that normally takes?
Probably at the next, we'll have it on the agenda for the next
For the
council.
22nd?
Yeah.
Yeah,
22nd?
April 22nd?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, great,
Okay.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks. At this time, before we get into our planning items, are there any other members of the public here to speak on any items? I think so. All right, we have the minutes. No, we don't have minutes. All right. Okay, we are down to planning items, and we have a report for information on the Affordable Housing Incentive. We have a number of representatives from Dalhousie here as well. Okay.
Hello, everyone. This report and presentation is just for information purposes only and discussion. As this initiative progresses forward, staff will return to council and recommend any changes to the definition of and policies to support affordable housing. Just some background. On April 3rd, 2023, Bridgewater Town Council provided direction to staff to begin working on CMHC's Housing Accelerator Fund, a $4 billion fund to accelerate development of all types of housing. Unfortunately, we did not receive the funding. However, the application was required to contain at least 5 initiatives that would be completed during that 3-year funding period. The work that went into developing the HAF application was used to develop a housing action plan for the town, separate from but with considerations to the Housing Accelerator Fund. The town's housing action plan includes 6 initiatives that the town will undertake, the first of which is to develop an affordable housing incentive program. Through collaboration with the Masters of Planning program at Dalhousie, the town engaged a group of students who recommended a list of policies and programs that could incentivize the creation and retention of affordable housing in Bridgewater. The student team has been working on their project since January 2024, and the project has kind of concluded in their class, but we recommended that they come to council and have an opportunity to deliver that to you themselves. Council will be updated on further work regarding the program, and stakeholders throughout the process were engaged, and they will be provided an update on the work as well. And now I'm just going to hand out a handout from the team and welcome them to the tournament.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome, council and residents. So we are Roots Consulting, and we're here to present to you the results of the Growing Together project, where we will offer affordable housing solutions for the town of Bridgewater. This project was completed, as Connor said, under the guidance of Energize Bridgewater and planning staff. So this presentation will give you an introduction to us, Roots Consulting, tell you about the Growing Together project, give you our affordable housing definition, and our affordable housing strategies. So once again, we are Roots Consulting. We're a group of 5 Masters of Planning students and soon-to-be graduates of Dalhousie University School of Planning. My name is Danielle McCabe, and I'm here with my colleagues Lauren McDonald, Devin Bell, and Cindy Griffiths. We do also have a 5th group member, Joseph Ambo, who could not join us this evening. So we are here to present to you the Growing Together project, which will provide you with recommendations to be used in the Affordable Housing Incentive Program as part of the first initiative of the Bridgewater Housing Action Plan. The purpose of this project was to develop a range of innovative policy options for the town of Bridgewater that would incentivize maintaining and growing the affordable housing stock within the town. Our objectives were to gather stakeholder insight regarding the housing development and affordability, recommend a new definition of affordable housing, and recommend strategies that can be implemented in the planning strategy, land use bylaws, and beyond that could maintain and grow the affordable housing stock. So how do we do it? So to recommend a new definition of affordable housing, which was our second objective, we completed a policy review of Bridgewater's current definition and as well as the past definition research and considerations. We also completed a national jurisdictional scan and a literature review to determine justification for different approaches for definitions. To recommend our strategies, which was our third objective, we completed a policy review of the Municipal Government Act, as well as Bridgewater's existing strategies and policies. We also did a jurisdictional scan of strategies that have been used in jurisdictions in Nova Scotia, as well as some other Canadian communities. And then we completed stakeholder engagement through a survey and interviews with housing stakeholders within your community. So in completed these processes, we completed a new definition of affordable housing, and we also created some feasible strategies that could be used to address affordable housing within Bridgewater. So as stated, our second objective was to create and recommend a holistic definition of affordable housing. This was intended to consider the needs of Bridgewater's residents specifically. Our research found that there's 2 types of definitions that are currently being used across Canada. The first is a market-based approach, and this uses average market prices in an area and then sets a threshold below that as being what's considered affordable. So it might be the average market rent is $600 for a 1-bedroom, and it would be 60th percentile below that. That would be very low, though. And the other type, which is much more commonly used, is an income-based approach, which defines affordable housing as being less than a certain portion of a household income. And it can be used or expressed as a person-based approach or a unit-based approach. So the person-based approach is much more common, and it's what Bridgewater currently uses, as well as CMHC. So that 30% of before-tax income would be an example. So based on our findings, as well as some other considerations to make a holistic definition of affordable housing, those other considerations would be things like suitability and adequacy, so those other considerations of core housing need, tenure, housing costs, housing provider, as well as the housing continuum. So while all these are very important, And part of the discussion in creating affordable housing, these have never been found all together in one definition. So we casted a wide net and we did that. So our recommended definition of affordable housing is adequate and suitable housing of any tenure where all shelter costs make up a maximum of 30% of before tax household income. This definition applies to housing provided in private, public, and nonprofit sectors and can refer to any part of the housing continuum. So the intention in creating this type of definition was that it can be used by Bridgewater staff to develop policy, amend their planning documents, enforce affordability requirements, and implement affordable housing tools. So by using a holistic definition that considers the various aspects of housing and housing costs, it can assist with developing the necessary planning and development tools, policies, and it could also potentially be used in the maintenance and management of affordable housing units should Bridgewater want to go that way too. So my colleague Lauren will now go over our strategy recommendations.
Thank you, Danielle. Now we will be sharing our strategy recommendations for the town to incentivize maintenance and growth of the affordable housing stock. Our recommendations cover both changes to the town's municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, as well as initiative and program-based recommendations. Due to the town's constraints surrounding wastewater capacity, we understand that not everything we're here today to recommend can be an immediate change. Therefore, we have categorized our recommendations into 3 distinct categories for implementation. The first is Act Now, which has a time frame of 1 year. The second is Near Future, which has a time frame of 5 years due to their increased complexity to implement. And finally, there's Ongoing Strategies, which does not have a specific timeline, but would rather be built on over time. Our first recommendation and only recommendation in Act Now is to waive parking requirements for affordable housing developments. We heard that for-profit developers would still include parking in their residential developments, even if these requirements were waived in order to be competitive in the market. However, we did hear that nonprofit stakeholders that the removal of these parking requirements would help them to overcome the many cost barriers that they face when it comes to developing affordable housing. Moving to our near future recommendations, the first is nominal value land transfer to nonprofits. This would involve the municipality transferring land to nonprofit housing developers for a nominal fee. Other municipalities in Nova Scotia have used this mechanism previously to transfer land to nonprofit entities for $1. This mechanism is already possible within the Municipal Government Act and enables nonprofit developers to overcome the hurdle of land acquisition, which was a significant barrier we heard many times during our engagement process. Our second recommendation is modifications to the town's density bonusing for affordable housing policies and regulations. We are recommending that the town considers opening density bonusing up to site plan approval or as of right in certain zones. While our stakeholder feedback acknowledged this as being an effective change, there isn't really a large incentive for it at the moment. However, in conjunction with other strategies we're here recommending, it could be a useful option later on if monitoring of the newly updated policy shows uptake is lacking. Our final recommendation in this time frame is waiving permitting fees and diminishing property taxes for nonprofits. Planning-related fees and property taxes were another barrier identified in the development and maintenance of affordable housing. We are recommending that permitting fees be waived for nonprofits and a diminishing property tax system be implemented for nonprofit housing developers. A diminishing property tax system would help offset the cost of affordable housing development while also ensuring that the town could still collect some of that tax revenue over time. Our final set of recommendations is ongoing strategies. The streamlining of affordable housing development will improve the capacity and financial feasibility of nonprofits' ability to develop in Bridgewater, and at the same time incentivize for-profit developers to build due to easier processes. The following recommendations can work in conjunction or in isolation, depending on the capacity of the town to implement them. However, we believe that in conjunction, they can effectively work to address the town's goal of streamlining development. A dedicated housing navigator we envision being modeled after the community coordinator role that's already here at the town. A housing navigator would be dedicated to working with all stakeholders to help provide support for our housing-specific development needs, such as facilitating affordable housing information distribution, stakeholder relationship building, and developing resources for affordable housing developers. The facilitation of knowledge sharing could be a component of the housing navigator's role or conducted by other staff here at the town. The town would act as a facilitator between stakeholders to help relationships be built across the sector, which is lacking as uncovered during our engagement process. Knowledge sharing would look like helping nonprofits enter the housing development world, and also for-profit developers understanding what resources are available to them when they're developing affordable housing. Pre-approved designs could be a catalog of approved housing designs for different zones. Nonprofits noted to us that it's a huge barrier knowing what kind of development can happen on their land. A lot of pre-development work is required to get projects off the ground that nonprofits aren't necessarily well versed in, and this would help to alleviate that barrier. Finally, preferred partners refers to partnering for-profit developers with nonprofit housing providers for the management of affordable housing units. We heard from for-profit developers that the management of affordable units is a barrier to them developing them. A preferred partners program could work in conjunction with density bonusing, where affordable units are created by for-profit developers and then managed by nonprofit housing providers. Our team at Roots Consulting would like to thank the Town of Bridgewater's Community Development Department, particularly Connor McCrory, Megan Doucette, and Jessica McDonald for trusting us with this project and supporting us in developing these recommendations that we're proud to be here tonight sharing with you all. We'd also like to thank our course supervisors, Eric and Reed, who are with us here tonight as well for all of their support throughout the semester. And thank you all to Bridgewater's Town Council for having us here tonight to share our work with you all. That concludes our presentation, and we're now open to questions.
Very well done. Questions from members of council? Councilor Tanner.
I'm curious about your concept of diminishing property taxes. Did you have any thought as to it being some sort of cut rate, or does it steadily decline over time, or?
Yeah, so it was mirrored after what's currently being used in the city of Charlottetown. So it's actually part of their affordable housing incentive program as well. So what they do is it's over a 10-year period, and so for the municipal portion of their property taxes, for years 1 to 2, it might be it's 90% is cut, and then it goes down every 2 years, so it's 10 years over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor McDonald.
The density bonusing, I believe that's something that we already do. Are you just suggesting that, that it be as part of site plan approval so that it's more accessible or more easily accessible? What?
Yeah, one of the things we heard from stakeholders is that the process to obtain a development agreement takes a long time, and that it could potentially be helpful for them to have that process be shortened by doing as-of-right or site plan approval. However, without other streamlining initiatives, there's not a massive incentive for it at the moment, which is why we put it in a later time frame.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by all shelter costs in terms of determining 30% of gross income?
Yeah, so we saw in some areas that they gave a specific definition. Aside from affordable housing, they also defined shelter costs. And we'll elaborate this more on our final report that will be submitted. But we put in shelter costs to kind of mirror that, knowing that the town yourselves would have to define what shelter costs mean and what is appropriate for you and your residents. We understand that certain things might not be appropriate because some things are not actually under the municipality's control. So that might not be appropriate to put in. Yeah.
Councilor McDonald.
And overall, what I'm hearing is faster and cheaper. The developers want to move faster and cheaper. Is there any concern for a lack of quality when we go faster and cheaper, and affordable housing becoming kind of subpar housing if we allow it to go too fast and too cheap?
Sure. I think I think that most of our suggestions and recommendations that we're making are specifically geared towards nonprofit housing developers who would have additional support, but quality isn't so much a concern of ours just because of things like building code that are already in effect that have to be abided by. And yeah, I think it was kind of alluded to with the waiving of parking requirements for nonprofit housing development, that for-profit housing developers are going to build to market standards and want to be competitive within the market, so the quality is not so much a concern there because they'll build higher quality to gain higher profits.
Okay.
Questions? I thought it was a great presentation. Certainly a lot of food for thought in there, and appreciate the work that you did working with staff, and I'm sure this is coming back for some further discussion and direction at some point, because we've got some recommendations here for us. So staff will bring that back, will they?
Yeah, I believe we're going to wait for the final report, and then I think Connor and the group will bring it back to council to seek some direction on how we want to look at implementing the recommendations through our plan review or more immediate steps.
Perfect. I appreciated your presentation and the slides and the pace and all that. If you're looking for feedback on that, I thought you all did very well on that, so thank you. Thanks. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. We are down to 6.2, which is the discharging development agreement for 493 King Street. And that would be a Mr. Brown item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. So this item relates to a staff-initiated request to discharge an inactive development agreement that was registered on 493 King Street. It's the former Bank of Montreal building. On January 13th, 2020, Council approved a development agreement with the owners of the subject property, Black Seal Properties Limited, to permit a multi-unit residential development to a maximum of 19 dwelling units, together with ground floor building frontage occupied by commercial use, with more than 50% of the ground floor area used for commercial purposes. The building would be more than 6 stories from King Street grade, as prescribed by the approved development agreement. The development agreement was signed on September 21st, 2020. The development agreement was subsequently amended by resolution of Council. The amending agreement was signed October 12th, 2021, and included changes to the building characteristics section and the sanitary sewer services and stormwater management section of the 2020 development agreement. In accordance with the Municipal Government Act and sections 22C and 22E of the 2020 development agreement, Council may discharge the development agreement if use as permitted by the agreement has not commenced within 12 months of the date of the agreement. That 12-month period has lapsed. Therefore, in consultation with the owner of the subject property, staff are requesting a discharge of the development agreement and any related amending instruments. That's the questions. Thank you.
Questions from Council? Councillor Caldwell?
It sounds as though the developer is in agreement with the discharge.
The developer is in agreement, and what I didn't say is that last week we issued a permit for an as-of-right development on the subject property, and that's 6 residential dwelling units and that ground floor commercial component, same as the development agreement. So they are going to be developing the property within the existing building envelope that is there today. So from their perspective, there's no need to have this development agreement any longer.
Will they be adding any height?
No.
No?
The existing building is going to be renovated to accommodate the new use.
Okay.
Councillor Conklin.
Parking implications. Wasn't parking added to the PID for the original development agreement?
In the development agreement, parking is captured just as it is with the land use bylaw, in that it has to be on a lot within 300 feet of the main entrance of the building, through confirmation of a written agreement submitted to the town. So when there is not available parking on site, and in this case, it would only apply to the residential component, because parking requirements are waived for commercial in that zone, and it's 1 space for every 2 units. So because there's not parking on the site, the development agreement simply says, as the land use bylaw says, that parking has to be provided within 300 feet of the main entrance by written agreement. And so that is still the case for the development that was permitted as of right through permit issuance last week.
So, yeah, so Didn't we add some parking then in behind that building to accommodate however many units we were looking at the time?
Yes. I believe we did.
We did, we built 8 spaces, and I'm just looking at the lease now. We leased 5 to Black Seals, and they pay a set rate, and they are leasing those spaces now, just using them for other tenants as opposed to that particular building.
Okay.
Because the lease is with the property owner, not
That's
the
correct.
property.
Yeah, and it was needed to satisfy the requirements of the development agreement. It's a 15-year lease, so there's a number of years left on that lease, and there'll be, as I say, they are being leased and used for tenants of other buildings that owner has.
So that would have been, so that was part of the original development agreement?
It's a separate agreement altogether, but yeah, it's a lease agreement. So the lease agreement was a requirement to be satisfied as part of the development agreement. So discharging the development agreement does not affect that lease agreement.
Okay. So with this new development, they need 3 parking spaces?
Correct.
Right? At least 3?
Yep, 3.
So is that something that they would be coming to us for?
Those 3 are being captured or are captured in that lease agreement for
the
park.
5?
So that lease agreement came out of the original development agreement negotiation. That was the next step for Black Seal Properties, was to find that parking, and so they entered into the lease with the town. They have been using it for those parking spaces for their other tenants, but those parking spaces are now being dedicated, or will be dedicated, to the 6 residential units, and requirement for 3 parking spaces for 493 King Street.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Thorburn?
Just to be clear, how many parking spots are they paying for? Is it 5 or is it 8? 5.
There's 3 that are the towns, like that
Okay.
you have a town permit for.
So they'll still be paying for 5 under the lease, so it's not
Leases
going to
for-
change anything?
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Councilor Conklin?
Sorry, yeah. What are the terms of the lease?
So it sets out a rental amount.
Yeah.
And that's a 15-year term.
Yeah, like how much are we talking here?
We rent those out for, they're $35 a space, and I believe that's a little over what our rental amount is for town hall permits.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a 15-year term, so.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
Would you like a motion?
I'd love a motion, thank you.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater, pursuant to Section 229-2 of the Municipal Government Act, approve the discharging agreement as shown on Appendix A of document number 19-140E, which discharges the 2020 development agreement and 2012 amending agreement for 493 King Street, PID 6002-9915.
Perfect, thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Fagier. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We are down now to first reading of and consideration for municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments for wastewater system capacity constraints.
Sorry. Okay, so, wastewater system capacity constraints, and these are the proposed municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments. The purpose being to condition as-of-right development to require an assessment of wastewater or sanitary sewer capacity in the subject area of the development. So over time, and culminating in a report in 2012, certain assumptions have been made with respect to wastewater service infrastructure throughout the town. Design considerations included assumptions about future growth in combination with existing systems and zoning that have been in place for many years prior. In 2014, town's planning documents were revised with an aim to maximize the use of existing infrastructure, so more compact development, The new zoning implemented in 2014 did not anticipate the rate and magnitude of development pressures to be experienced in Bridgewater from 2014 until today. The maximization of density permissions has resulted in the lack of capacity in the wastewater system to handle development. In 2018, the 2018 Sanitary Stormwater Master Plan really started the conversation around wastewater capacity at the pump stations and in the collection system. Staff began to require an offset for any new wastewater contribution to the system. Practically, this meant that each development needed to find ways to reduce additional storm water that may be entering the town's sanitary system. Born out of the 2018 plan, the inflow and infiltration study includes practical testing to validate theoretical work. The town has completed flow monitoring, smoke testing, sewer videoing, an annual sewer cleaning program, and council implemented the wastewater betterment charge bylaw in 2021. The master infrastructure plan process was another step to realize the extent of the wastewater capacity constraints throughout the town. The idea was to begin in areas with large amounts of vacant unserviced lands. Glen Allen, the business park north of the 103, and east of North Street were completed as phases 1 through 3. There was a planned phase 4 and then a final phase that would tie the findings together. These master infrastructure planning processes have been important to the further realization of the constraints currently faced with respect to wastewater around Bridgewater. Additionally, the 2018 Sanitary Stormwater Master Plan included a map displaying sanitary sewer modeling results as the town's main trunk routes were examined during the study period. I apologize, as the map on the screen is likely not legible to most. But what it shows are existing conditions as of 2018. Pipe surcharging under current conditions, so those already over capacity. Pipe surcharging at 25% future build-out, 50% and 100% future build-out. As mentioned, the early focus was a one-to-one offsetting, taking that same amount of flow via stormwater improvements that was being generated by new development. However, based on this mapping exercise in 2018 and further realization through subsequent studies, plans, and processes, where it was determined that pipe diameters around town were a concern, not only during wet weather, that's when the town started to require an assessment downstream of the wastewater or sanitary sewer capacity for new development. The planning strategy and land use bylaw have policy requirements for larger scale development, so development agreements, municipal planning strategy, and/or land use bylaw amendments that ensure wastewater impacts are understood. However, this ability to determine whether the development can be accommodated with or without system improvements is not available for as-of-right developments via current regulation of the land use bylaw. For clarity, as-of-right development is where the zoning in the land use bylaw specifically permits the proposed use and development of land without discretionary approval of council or by council. As-of-right development is reliant on the development permit issued by the development officer. The issuance of a development permit occurs prior to the issuance of a building permit by the building official. Requesting a new sewer connection for new development, if one doesn't yet exist, requires approval of the town engineer and is typically sought at the building permit stage. The development officer cannot presently refuse the issuance of a development permit based on an infrastructure deficit. As such, it is not because it is not a provision of the land use bylaw for as-of-right development. Basically, the zoning may permit the proposed development. However, when a new or upsized service connection is needed, the municipal engineer has discretion on whether to provide such approval. This authority is provided for within the Municipal Government Act. The underlying goal of the proposed policy amendments is to regulate development and enable growth where capacity is available in a manner that does not further exacerbate wastewater capacity issues. To accomplish this, the cleanest approach is to require the downstream sanitary sewer capacity assessments for all development, regardless of type and zone, where a new or larger service connection is necessary to accommodate that development or use. Existing lots with appropriately sized services stubbed at the property line and ready for connection would be excluded. Proposed policy INF-15 would apply to all designations and zones, and it reads, "It shall be the policy of council to require downstream sanitary sewer capacity assessment for any development that includes a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection where such an assessment is the responsibility of the developer where necessary information is not available. The town engineer shall have discretion and authority to approve new or upsized service connections, and such decision shall be made in consideration of available sanitary sewer collection system capacity at the time of application." And C, unless further prescribed by agreement, a downstream sanitary sewer assessment and any approval thereof shall be applicable for 6 months from development permit issuance. So the proposed natural exemptions to that proposed policy INF-15 would include infill opportunity, not needing upsized sanitary service connections. So again, those properties that are already serviced with appropriately sized sanitary. Residential conversions as presently permitted by the land use bylaw. Accessory dwelling units where the accessory structure cannot be further subdivided and placed on a separate lot through the subdivision process. Home-based businesses, and any change of use, including commercial instances where upsized sanitary is not required in accordance with the design and construction standards pursuant to the subdivision bylaw. These exemptions consider developments such as infill, conversions, and accessory structures used to incrementally increase residential density. Otherwise, the town engineer would have authority on the provision of any new or upsized service connections, and that decision would be made in consideration of available wastewater collection system capacity at the time of development permit application. Additionally, unless further prescribed by agreement, I've already said that, sorry, that 6-month rule, that would allow that assessment to be in play for 6 months, after which a new assessment would be necessary. The proposed amendments to the land use bylaw would include new regulation under the general provisions section to introduce the requirement for any development that includes a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection to be assessed with submission requirements incorporated. And so that reads, in addition to all other requirements governing land use, any development that includes a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection shall be assessed, and the applicant shall submit the following requirements prepared by an engineer licensed to practice in Nova Scotia to the satisfaction of the town engineer. Downstream sanitary sewer capacity assessment in consideration of capacity limitations in the wastewater system and the town's ability to handle the anticipated wastewater flows from proposed developments. The assessment shall include system capacity analysis based on 1, theoretical flow from the proposed development, 2, pipe sizes in the area, so those pipe diameters, and 3, theoretical flows that already exist in the system upstream from the proposed development. And then notwithstanding the above, where the development officer determines that the town is in possession of the necessary information to inform the town engineer's decision to approve a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection, those above requirements would be waived. Staff also propose an asterisk above the permitted developments section of each applicable zone and a new provision under the special requirements section of each zone, in addition to that general provision, to confirm and clarify that any development that includes a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection shall be assessed and approved in consideration of available wastewater or sanitary sewer collection system capacity, again, at the time of development permit application. Sorry. And as a special requirement, sorry, I'm going to go back. That reads, any development that includes a new or upsized sanitary sewer connection shall be assessed and approved in consideration of available wastewater collection system capacity at the time of development permit application. The applicant shall submit a downstream sanitary sewer capacity assessment in accordance with MPS, that's Municipal Planning Strategy Policy INF-15, and subject to the requirements outlined in section 3.1.36, which would be that general provision. The amendments proposed are intended to be interim in nature while work progresses on Council's strategic priorities related to wastewater capacity and development. The development charges project is crucial to the larger goal of removing uncertainty of and reducing the risk to developing both residential and commercial properties in Bridgewater. Not only will the town have a full wastewater system model for a complete picture of constraints or opportunities, but the town will also be able to derive a cost contribution model to facilitate cost-sharing agreements with new developments. The development charges project should take 2 or so years to reach completion. More immediately, staff will be investigating an interim capital cost contribution model or policy, cost-sharing model to help direct staff when the town receives requests to cost share on upgrades to wastewater infrastructure, not currently included in the 10-year capital program, to support developments that cannot proceed without such infrastructure improvements. The review of the town's planning documents is scheduled to begin in 25-26 tentatively. That process will take a few years to completion, and in consideration of a fully modeled wastewater system, planning policy and enabled development regulation can be aligned in a manner to manage the wastewater capacity constraints and growth most effectively. The plan review can also examine other ways to mitigate concern with wastewater capacity, so the proposed wastewater-related amendments should be designed to exist until plan review is completed. Additionally, staff are seeking council's direction to review the town's existing public sewer bylaw and land lease community bylaw in ways that would complement and support the proposed amendments to the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw. So with that, it is staff's recommendation that council give first consideration to the proposed amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw as included in the report as Appendix A, and to schedule a public hearing for May 13th, 2024.
Thank you, Nick. Questions from Council Tanner?
Nick, I'm not sure if I understand this completely, but could we get into a scenario where the development officer approves the development, the build, whatever it might be, only for the engineer to say, sorry?
Currently, yes, that's sort of the situation that we're in. We're not doing that. We're working together and ensuring that the applicant is cautioned, in advance of the application for development permit. But because we do not currently have the regulation in the land use bylaw to allow the development officer to deny a permit application for a wastewater constraint, that is the situation we're basically in now, where a permit could be issued, a building permit could be issued, and then when they go to seek installation of a new service lateral or a set of services, they are denied. So these amendments really are designed to clean up that process so that the development officer can stop that and make sure that permits aren't issued without, or prematurely, or without being able to get their services.
So how does that work internally? You or whomever and the engineer sit down with the developer and say, here's the issue at hand?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Just curious.
Just
to avoid confusion
it
and misinterpretation and all that kind of fun stuff.
So
yeah.
The development officers at the town would be 90%, 99% of the time the first point of contact. We know to have those conversations with the engineering department. And we know as much as we can know about the system itself. So it becomes important to early on in those discussions to caution the applicant or the developer that okay, we need to have more conversation, we need to have a meeting, we need to sit down because you may not get a new service connection.
Okay.
And so at this point in time, we're actually requiring those assessments for for as of right development, even though the regulation doesn't tell us to. We're doing it, so they don't get the developers don't get into that situation.
Okay. So my understanding of these assessments is they're quite expensive, relatively, I guess. Have you had any developers push back and say, that's a lot of money you're asking me to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And is it becoming a problem that they're pushing, a problem in that we're potentially losing a development as a result of these additional costs, I guess?
Yeah, I would, I can't say for sure, but yeah, there have been developers or prospective developers who don't like that we would require this assessment. They feel that if the services are there in the street, they should be able to connect. So we do have many conversations that are one and done.
Okay. Councilor Caldwell.
Approximately how costly and time-consuming are these assessments?
Well, I think I'll say that they're in the few $1,000s range, but it really depends on the scale of the assessment. So, if you're at the north end of King Street, it's quite a larger study area than if you are downtown on King Street, for example. So it really comes down to the scope of the study itself. What we're seeing are a few engineering firms doing more of these. So as the consulting engineers become more familiar with the assessment and what the town is looking for, I don't know if that impacts price, but I think it impacts timeline because the assessments are coming back more quickly. There are fewer questions asked about what exactly we're looking for. Again, because there's only a handful of engineering firms that really we're dealing with these assessments, so they're becoming quite familiar with the process. But from what I understand, a few $1,000s, give or take, perhaps $5,000 or $6,000. I don't really know for sure, but that's what I've been hearing.
And it takes few months?
Well, from the consulting engineer's perspective, it can take a few weeks to a month or more. I guess it depends, again, on a few variables. And then the town's engineering department has to review those assessments as well. So there's some time on the review side to consider.
And so why would we require assessments for properties where we should know whether or not they would be okay to develop?
The hope is that we are able to know more and have more certainty, but where there is any uncertainty with respect to the capacity downstream, we have an obligation at this point to require that assessment. I would like to stand here and say we know more about our systems, and that's certainly not a knock against staff or anything that's been done in the past. But it's very fluid and it's ever-changing, and with the infiltration of stormwater within that system, it's hard for staff to say determinatively in a moment that, yes, we have capacity in our downstream sanitary sewer for that development, whether it's 10 units or 100 units. We want the comfort of the certainty to ensure that we're not causing surcharging or sewer backups or whatever else may occur when capacity is not there. So I wish we knew more, but it's a difficult thing.
I guess my concern would be more for like a single unit dwelling in an area where we either knew it was a problem or knew that we could probably accommodate it. Like, is it necessary to have the study done in that case?
Again, it kind of depends on the area, but because there are some areas of town that we know or we're certain enough that a permit can be issued. But our approach right now is my approach as development officer, and Connor as a development officer, would be to have that conversation with the engineering department. Most of the lots that can accommodate or are being developed as single unit dwellings or even 2 unit dwellings are already serviced. So a lot of the conversations we have for new developments, especially low density development, the services are already there. It could be Winburn Avenue or on Etna Street or something like that on Glen Allen Drive, where the services are already there. They just need to hook up. So that's that natural exemption that I spoke about. So it's only where the new or upsized, so larger services are needed. So on the low density side of things, we actually don't have that many discussions because the services are typically there and ready.
But there is a provision to Councillor Colwell's point. If you already know that there's capacity, then there was a notwithstanding.
There is, and so we hope to.
Or they wouldn't have to do it.
Through these assessments, through the development charges project, through other means, we hope to acquire a more complete picture so that, and that's why that provision is written the way it is, so that as we acquire more information, ideally, we can have those conversations on the spot. We can have a map, we can have that information, that data, and say, yes, you have sewer capacity in that area for that development. So we are in the process of creating a more complete picture.
Sorry to monopolize all the
it's all right.
time here. You mentioned the map, but I think the report said we wouldn't have a map. So I was wondering, how do we track all this without the map?
Yeah, the map I just referred to would be more of an internal resource, and I called it a map, but it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a number of different things. Initially, with this process, we had contemplated a map, and perhaps a map of the municipal planning strategy, so a policy map. But because the situation is so fluid and ever changing, and could really change from day to day in a way, to have a map that is out there in the public. And a policy map of the municipal planning strategy, we would have to come back to council and amend it every time there was an upgrade to a pipe or a realization that there is less capacity in a certain area of town than we thought. So the map that I just referred to would be a resource, ideally for staff, something that myself or Connor could have on our wall to refer to, but it would have to be amended or revised, every few weeks or so, just to make sure it's completely updated. That's why the map is a little bit concerning, we'll say, because you need to make sure, any map, you need to make sure it's up to date in the moment if you're going to be able to provide that accurate information. So what I was referring to more so is just information at hand. It could be a map, but it could be a spreadsheet.
Nick, just a question on the 6 months from development permit issuance. So the downstream sanitary sewer assessment and any approval of that is valid for 6 months from development permit issuance. I understand your comment about, the landscape's fluid in terms of what could affect an approval. But so 6 months from development permit issuance means what? What has to be completed within that 6 months?
So the assessment would be, that would be the service connection.
So is that enough time? Like, that's what I'm wondering is, like, when you get a development permit and then a building permit, is it enough time to reasonably expect that those connections would have taken place?
It may not be. So the idea there, and this is what I'm really, what we're alluding to with the review of the public sewer bylaw, there's a couple pieces there, but in staff's opinion, having a, it's really just my opinion, but staff's opinion, having a sewer permit. So in that case, that would be at the time of, like, perhaps building permit issuance, when they come, when the developer comes to the town to say, I have my building permit, I'm going to start my construction. Now I'd like to schedule the installation of the services. So that would be, in staff's mind, that would be the time to issue a sewer permit. That there isn't such a thing in the town right now. But that would be the 6 month mark. So development permit to so-called sewer permit or approval of services. But you're right, it may not be enough time to facilitate some development. It really depends on the development.
So what happens if they hit that 6 months and all they got in is their footings?
Yep, so they would have to reassess.
Right. So I'm just wondering if that might be something worth
Yeah.
looking at, yeah.
I agree, it is something to look at. Yeah.
Councilor McDonald.
If that were extended, that holds up the possibility of approving other developments. Does it not? Do I understand that correctly?
It does, and so that's why we try to keep it
as
relatively
possible.
short, because what it does is it locks up that capacity.
Right, so we need to find a balance.
So then that capacity is reserved for that development.
Right.
So that's the sort of the give and take in that timeline. It's a good point to make, but yeah, to actually build a new home even 6 months is quite.
Yeah.
But that's the trade-off. It's either you're locking up that capacity, that number of units for 12 months or whatever it may be, or 24, or you're trying to lessen that and then require a reassessment if they don't meet it.
Yeah. It's a tough balance. Good luck.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if if we feel, if council's comfortable with the 6 months, what's the risk to, if I'm the homeowner and I apply for a permit to build a home, and I have a hard time lining up contractors to get some of this work done?
Yeah.
So on the ground, I might have the permit in my hand, but on the ground, not much has happened besides cutting down some trees. What's the risk to me as the homeowner if that 6 months goes by and I, bought materials, put deposits down, and now I have to reassess? It's more money, obviously, but anything else?
But it's that risk. It's the same thing as today issuing the permit and then getting to that point with the town engineer being sort of the bad guy in that situation, say, no, you can't have your service connection. So the risk is quite significant in that case to the applicant, because if they wouldn't meet, if they can't meet the 6 month mark, they would be subject to a new assessment, which means subject to new approval. So in that case, the service connection could be denied the second time.
Yeah.
But if that unit or that number of units, so however many it may be, say 10 units, if that's been locked up by the current assessment, and then they turn around and reassess, I would assume that it's still there.
I mean, it's not like we've shied away from being open and transparent about our challenges. So I think going back to your original question about, I don't think there's developers out there who aren't aware that they need to have this discussion. I know the challenge is when you have as of right development, but we still can't allow it to hook up to our system. This is what this is going to help clean up, but this is awful. Not the presentation, not the no. I mean, it is what it is necessary, but it's really unfortunate that we're at this point. And as noted in the previous presentation, that we didn't get our housing accelerator grant, so it just delays shovels in the ground. Or,
yeah, so that I'm wondering if the 6 months may need to change. But also there were questions in the public meeting about a possible need for 2 assessments. Now, is that related to the timelines, or was that something else? And I'm wondering, is it something that can be avoided, and if so, how?
Well, that would be that 6 month, that timeline, because we don't want to lock up those units indefinitely. Staff believe there should be a timeline associated with the approval, we'll say, of the assessment. We have a development agreement in town that they were required to do an assessment, and then they were required to do another assessment at the time of permit application. So they needed to do an assessment for the development agreement, but because of the time between the development agreement process and when the permit application may be applied for, the development agreement had that structured so that they would have to submit a new assessment, and that's the question came from that development group. But it's for the same reason. So you do an assessment 1 year, And in that case, it's you know, a year or two later, things change. And right now things change because we can allow some developments here, we can allow some developments there. So we need to ensure there's still capacity downstream because it's been a year or two later, or it's been a year or two in between. So yeah, we want to avoid that. We don't want to continuously go out to developers and say, yeah, you have to reassess, you have to reassess. But at the same time, there needs to be some provision just so we don't have a bunch of developments who have an approval and now they're sitting around and potentially years pass. So there is a balance there, and I think that's what's that's very difficult in this situation.
Councilor McDonald.
Where did that 6-month number come from? Did you say it was just a reasonable amount of time to expect that not much has changed within 6 months?
Yes.
I thought that's what you said, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, staff considered 12 months, 9 months may be appropriate, but it's because things can change rather quickly. So again, it's just about ensuring that there is positive capacity in the collection system. So yeah, staff landed on 6 months, but to the CAO's point, that is a rather quick timeline to turn around a development and be ready for your services.
Other questions? Nick, are there any options out there to insert something midstream, so to speak, not a full wastewater facility, but something that can sort of temporarily handle some flow from somewhere, or?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay. I mean, I could get some information, speak to the engineering department, the town engineer, but I think unless you're ripping up the street and you know, perhaps installing a second pipe, like a dual pipe system or something like that, or upgrading the pipe in question, I'm not aware. So, you know, I spoke about we were and have leaned on this offsetting requirement that, you know, you take the stormwater out of the system and we can, but it doesn't work as well. Yeah.
Wow. Such a great discussion. All I can do for me is hope that this is something that is temporary as we march along with pump station improvements and infrastructure improvements and increased applications for funding and receiving funding, that this is a problem that has Nick coming back to council saying we can repeal some of these changes. So heck of a lot of federal funding was unleashed in the last few weeks. Unfortunately, not a lot of that applies to communities like ours, which I've expressed in an email I probably should have waited 24 more hours to send. But anyway, this frustrates me. There's tens of billions of dollars of money for housing that is not going to actually get to the pipes in the ground that translates into the brick and mortar construction of a house. That's our barrier. So I'm not picking on a federal party or a level of government. It's an awful lot of money, and what we're looking at is a $75 million problem that, if corrected, could allow us to develop more housing than has probably been announced in a lot of these announcements. So fingers crossed that some funding does kind of match this, and as we progress, like I said, that Nick can come back and say we don't need that anymore.
Nick, just out of curiosity, are you aware of any other communities, you know, Truro, Pictou, New Glasgow, that might be experiencing or implementing a very similar sort of issue?
No, I'm not.
No, okay. Worthy.
I think just to that, we have studied our wastewater system quite a bit.
Sure.
Too. So, like the level of detail we have, I'm not sure how comparable it would be to others. But I would suggest that combined systems in older towns are a common thing. It's just we and our assessments have been relatively recent too. So this is like a 2018 forward type thing where we become more aware of what our limitations are, and it's proactive steps.
Yeah, so we're being penalized for being proactive.
Well, yeah, I mean.
That was exactly how
Oh,
I phrased it in my
I was
email, as a matter
wondering
of
how
fact.
you use that.
As opposed to reactionary.
Yeah.
Yes, correct, okay.
You're right,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we could wait for the sewer backups,
Yeah.
but we don't want to do that.
Yeah, so the CAO's point to your question, I don't think it's that there aren't other communities in Nova Scotia that are not having the similar challenges, but if you don't look, then there's, it's an answer. The answer is no, but I think the answer is not based on data. So, just because we're not the oldest town in this, and we're not the only town that's been growing, so. Although we're the only town that's had steady growth, so maybe that does contribute to it, right? So we haven't had a declining population year since 1985, and we're the only community in the entire province that can say that. So if you had a COVID boom of 100 new residents, but over the previous 10 years you lost 300 residents, you've got capacity. We've never had a declining year, so that probably contributes to it greatly.
Yeah, and I think that just the ongoing maintenance and upgrading of our systems, again, new information, and we're kind of catching up. So you can't really speak to as well like the other towns and their capital budgets and how have they been maintaining their systems to the level they needed to so that they're not in this situation. But we kind of acknowledge that it's something that should have been started some time ago, just other pressures were there, and so here we are.
Any other questions, Councillor Thorburn?
And Nick, if there was a development up on the upper end of King Street and they had to go in and do a study to find out the flows and rates and whatnot, they'd go right down to the station itself?
Yeah, we usually look to take, and this is the determination of the town engineer, but we usually take the assessments down to either pump station 4 or pump station 3. So those are the two where the force main crosses underneath. So pump station 4 being at 400 King Street, just across from the Economic Center, and pump station 3 behind the mall / Cineplex. That's typically where we take the assessments to for each side of the river.
So my next question is, if once that assessment's done up on the upper end and somebody else was going to do something down below, would you have to do another assessment again?
Yeah.
Where you've already done one to calculate the flows? It doesn't seem that it would be required once you initially done it from the farthest distance, if your assumptions were correct.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And if we required a more practical analysis of flow data, then perhaps we could derive from one assessment that yes, there is capacity for another. But these assessments are specific to the number of units that development is proposing. So if you have a development proposing 100 units down at the north end of King Street, and then there's space in between. But say there are even just two lots that are adjacent to one another, and one is assessing for 100, and it comes back and it says, no, there's not capacity for 100 units. The neighboring property just downstream even could come in and say, well, we have 50 units, so we should be good. But we don't know that. We just know that 100 units can't go in. So we don't have a number. Based on the assessments that we receive, just because of the theoretical nature of the assessments that are required. It is really based on that number of units, and so they are individual assessments.
Okay.
But over time, we can start to really cobble together a much clearer picture based on all the assessments. If we have a number of assessments in the same area together with our local knowledge and information that we may have, then we should be able to piece that together quite concretely.
Further discussion? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
Sure.
Councillor Tom, thank you.
I move the Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater hereby conduct first reading of bylaw number 209, a bylaw to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw attached in document number 23-077C, and give notice that at the May 13th, 2024 council meeting, we will hold a public hearing respecting bylaw number 209, and upon close of the public hearing, consider second reading of the same.
Thank you. Seconded by everyone on this side, Councillor Thorburn. We've had a really good discussion. Yep, so this will be in a public hearing May 13th. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
We are down to 6.4. First reading, consideration amendments to the vending bylaw. Connor's coming back.
Hello again, everyone.
Say goodbye to the planning students who are now going, what?
Why did I choose this career?
It's always this exciting. Follow that
now. Not a chance. All right, I think this one's a little simpler. This report originates with motion 23-132, directing staff to draft changes to the vending bylaw with respect to permitted goods. Following concerns raised regarding the nature of retail sales in close proximity to a playground, council made a motion for staff to draft changes to the vending bylaw respecting retail vending. The Town of Bridgewater's vending bylaw was created to regulate when, where, and how people sell food, beverages, and other goods and services in Bridgewater's open spaces. The current vending categories include the sale of outdoor prepared food, unprepared food, art or handcrafted goods, mobile canteens, recreation and exercise classes, and other goods and services at the discretion of the development officer. Though the vending bylaw is a standalone bylaw, it works in conjunction with the sidewalk cafe bylaw and the town property bylaw to regulate the use of town-owned property. These bylaws should be kept in mind when making recommendations or changes to the vending bylaw. Additionally, in 2021, the open space plan was created to establish a long-term planning management strategy for Bridgewater's open spaces. The plan considers the context and proposes direction for the vending bylaw. On June 12th, 2023, staff received a motion from council to review the vending bylaw in regards of retail vending. Following concerns regarding the type of goods, specifically cannabis-related accessories, and their proximity to playgrounds, staff were directed to draft changes for consideration by council, which would differentiate between food and retail vending. During the review of the vending bylaw, staff responded to requests from Nova Scotia Public Health to put forward recommendations from a public health perspective. In preparation for our meeting, staff from the Nova Scotia Public Health reviewed the current vending bylaw and other related town documents through a health lens to encourage spaces that promote, support, and protect health for all town residents and visitors. Concerns highlighted in conversations with NSPH included the potential for conflicts of use in open spaces between vendors and those freely using the space, wording related to permitted goods and services and reducing the subjectivity of such, appropriateness of vending sites, specifically in proximity to schools, and increasing vending opportunities in underserviced areas. Following discussions with NSPH staff, their concerns and recommendations were considered. Given the current level of demand for vending sites and lack of correspondence relating to the conflicts of use, the potential conflicts between open space users and vendors is fairly limited, in staff's opinion. A jurisdictional scan was also completed by examining vending bylaws across local and national jurisdictions. Each bylaw is examined with the intent of better understanding administrational and operational aspects of the bylaws. Most notably, staff reviewed the permitted goods and services within the vending bylaws. The vending bylaw for the town currently identifies permitted goods in two ways. Firstly, the list of permitted goods to be sold. Secondly, permission from the administrator. Given the direction of council, the list of permitted goods within the vending bylaw should be addressed. The list currently includes outdoor sales of prepared food, outdoor sales of handcrafted goods and art, outdoor sales of unprepared food, recreation and physical activity classes, and sale of other goods or services not mentioned above with the approval of the DO. The issue lies primarily in the subjectivity regarding the sale of other goods and services not mentioned above. To address the concern raised by council, the list of permitted goods and services derived from the jurisdictional scan helped inform staff proposed amendments. Staff's preferred option is to update the list of permitted goods and services to remove subjectivity from the list, ensuring consistency in the administrative process. The updated list in Section 4 of the vending bylaw includes the removal of subsection F, the sale of other goods and services not mentioned above, with the approval of the development officer, and the amendments would include the sale of clothing and accessories and sale of plants and flowers. Additionally, definitions were added in Section 2 of the bylaw for clarity and to reduce subjectivity for the following: flowers, handcrafted goods, and plants. The definitive list would narrow the scope of vending permissions. However, following a comprehensive review of vending bylaws across jurisdictions, there are a few types of vending. It is a fairly definitive list, and following the jurisdictional scan, there wasn't any other types of vending that were noted in the other vending bylaws that were not captured in this scope. Alternatively, staff could update the provision for sale of other goods and services not mentioned above, thereby maintaining some flexibility or subjectivity, providing flexibility with the administration of the bylaw, while excluding certain goods and services deemed incompatible with vending in a public space and in consideration of the Cannabis Control Act. The proposed amendment would include updated language as follows: sale of other goods and services not mentioned above with the approval of the development officer, excluding those goods and services that may negatively influence young people by the means of promotion of unhealthy lifestyles. This option aims to address council's intention of concerns regarding the vending of goods that may negatively impact children and young people, while maintaining subjectivity and a wide scope of permitted goods within the bylaw. There were concerns from the town solicitor that from a legal perspective, this option may, it would be beyond the town's role in determining what determines unhealthy lifestyles. So with that, it is recommended that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater conduct first reading for the amendments to Chapter 197 vending bylaw as shown in Appendix A, and give notice to conduct a second reading of the same amendments at the May 13th council meeting.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Tanner?
When we grant permission for an area like Shipyard's Landing, do we specifically tell that vendor where to park in that particular area? Like I've experienced, I guess, one mobile vendor where, due to popularity, I guess, the public was sort of sprawled out into what would be the roadway. Not the main road, but certainly the roadway leading in. I'm just curious.
There is discussions with the vendor on the siting within the park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Fashier, thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll make a motion. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater hereby conduct first reading of bylaw number 210, a bylaw to amend Chapter 197, vending bylaw, attached in document number 24-059, and give notice at the May 13th, 2024 council meeting. Town Council will consider second reading of the same.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor McDonald. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We are down to correspondence for action, and we received a letter from the Pickleball Committee requesting a couple of Bridgewater councillors be on the committee, and then there's some other questions, grants and things like that. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that or just...
I think that, yeah, so they're requesting some council representation on the committee, but also that our grant coordinator be utilized to help source grants. And that would involve a broader discussion about the scope of service that our grant coordinator provides, because traditionally it's, I shouldn't say traditionally, it is sourcing grants for town-led projects and initiatives that help offset costs to the taxpayer in terms of infrastructure and services that the town directly provides. So this would kind of open that door to the nonprofit organization component of the community looking for that type of support. And that is a little bit of a shift in direction. So it may be something that council wants to have a broader discussion about at a discussion session. The other component of that is that the town, in terms of pickleball and whether this becomes a town-led initiative or a support for a group, what are our future plans with respect to this type of activity within our own parks and facilities, and how does this fit in? Are there regional opportunities for partnerships, those things? That's a little bit of a larger discussion than perhaps just tonight.
Yeah, so the thought is to put us on a discussion session, get more information, see what's involved. I don't know if that would involve inviting the members of this group as well.
I think that it probably could involve
to get
having them
some
come to
clarification.
ask some questions, understand exactly what the expected role of the town would be, and have some of those conversations about, is this going to be town-led or nonprofit organization-led, and who are the other partners that could be part of this? So a little bit more of an open dialogue.
Councilor Thorburn?
And my question was, if, when we have this discussion session, to invite the two people that wrote the letter theirs to further answer our questions or concerns or issues that may come up.
We'll make sure we do that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilor Caldwell?
Great, that sounds great. But MODL has money set aside for pickleball courts, and I know the location has fallen through, so they're currently without a location as far as I know. So if we're interested in pickleball courts, it seems natural that we would attempt to try to partner with them.
So I think that would be part of the whole discussion that we would have is what are the possibilities there, right? So a little bit of discussions, like first I think it would involve whether we want to have those conversations or send the committee to have those conversations.
Okay.
Depends on what our role is going to be within this. But there definitely are probably some conversations around, is this a regional facility, and and what are the 2 municipal units, if not more, what are the roles within that?
Is someone prepared to make a motion? We'll put that on a discussion session and make sure we invite members of the committee. Deputy Mayor Fisher, thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater defer the matter of pickleball committee to a future discussion session of council.
Councilor Thorburn, no can count on that. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to reports and recommendations. We have the building inspection report for February 2024. Figure out what that large number is, but town is busy, and just a reminder to the public that are watching, all the documents that we have are also open and available to the public on the town's website under the council tab and agendas, and everything we've heard up until this point and following this is all there. And so is the building inspection report. And then we have the 2023-24 Q3 financial reports. Over to our Director of Finance.
Sure. So I'll just kind of go through the highlights. You have both the written report as well as the financials in the package. So I'm not going to go through everything that's in that. But the highlight of it is that we're projecting a budget surplus of just over $2 million. It's significant, but it stems from two things: revenue that's over budget and expenses that are under budget. So about $1 million comes from on the revenue side and about $1 million on the expense side. So the two combined to have a pretty significant surplus this year. Again, this is just up to the end of December, not taking into account everything that's happened up to year end. So one of the main things, and we talk about it every time, is D-transfer tax. And so D-transfer tax was budgeted to be $500,000, and it came in, I think we're sitting like as without March included about $920,000. In the next week or so we should know what March's number is, so we're projecting that to be quite a bit over budget. And what that has permitted us to do is put that in reserve, and council, the recommendation for year end will be to put that in reserve and then use that to fund capital. So while I know we somewhat budget conservatively, there's always a purpose, and it's always council's decision on how to spend that money. even when it comes in over budget. So it's not used up in operations in the year of. In addition to that, we have sewer revenue a little bit under budget. The main reason for that is just when we budget for sewer, we take into account the units we know, but we also take into that development agreements that are likely to be finished during the year, and so there's some that just weren't connected in the year, so we should see those in the coming fiscal year. The other main revenue source, kind of skipping down through some of them, would be that our interest rate on town bank accounts is over budget, but also, if you recall, we have $33 million of capital carry forward projects. So what's happened is we always anticipate some of the town's operating money will be used to temporarily fund those capital projects until they're complete, and then we can issue debentures to fund those. So in addition to the interest rate being higher, we also are carrying a higher bank balance than we would have been had those projects been using up all the cash flow at certain points during the year, in particular at the end of construction season. So since those projects aren't done, we didn't have to use as much of our own money to get us through to spring and fall debenture time. And so that higher balance has resulted in more interest. And we're expecting that to be $535,000 over budget. Again, we're going to recommend that the surplus from 23-24 go into reserve, and then we talk about it in the budget presentation later, but that's funding capital projects that are in the 24-25 capital budget. Other highlights would just be that, there's some additional grant monies that were unexpected. And if you recall, every few council meetings we have designated community project fund applications, which results in us issuing grants, and those donations are recognized as revenue to offset those. So that always results in us being over budget on the revenue side and the expense side, but they 100% offset each other. So you'll see that comment in here as well. On the expense side, most of the explanations are that we had some savings from recruitment or vacant positions. So under administration, we had some delayed recruitment and associated project costs with those. Under finance, as you're aware, we've rebudgeted for budget software and time and attendance software for 24-25. So those projects are, we didn't spend the money in 23-24, so those projects are carrying forwards, contributing to some of the surplus for the year. Under information management and employee management, those are both contracts with the Municipal Joint Services Board, and so we've seen some savings, and some of it's just timing as to when we get billed for services. Under police services, they're expecting that their expenses are going to be under budget at year-end by about $170,000, mostly as a result of staffing vacancies, and then some fuel cost savings as well. They do have a workers' comp, which has come in over budget, so it's offsetting those couple areas of savings. In fire protection, they're actually budgeting to be over budget, or expecting to be over budget by the end of the year, just largely as a result of repairs to equipment that are, they do their best to budget those, but they can be somewhat unpredictable. On other protective services, which are primarily building and fire inspection services, if you recall, we were budgeting for permit tracking software and record scanning, and again, that project's been carried forward to 24-25, so we're under budget in that area as well. Under transportation services, we have various areas of savings on fuel, on vacant staff positions, and some of those vacancies and staff capacity have led to roads, curbs, and sidewalk maintenance being under budget. On transit, again, projecting to be under budget on expenditures by about $37,000 as a result of wage savings and fuel costs. Last year, if you recall, in 22-23, we had some pretty volatile fuel prices. And so we might have budgeted a bit conservatively and put our fuel estimates up for 23-24 on account of really uncertainty around fuel prices. And what we've realized in most areas that those fuel costs have actually been lower. It's saving some money in those budgets as well. Those are really the highlights. There's, for the most part, there's a few other areas that are up and down, but the one last one on the last page of the written document relates to extraordinary items, and that's the result of hurricane and flood costs that were encountered by the town, and that's about $336,000 as of the end of March, knowing we likely still have some things that we're going to be encountering going into the future. As of this point, we have not received any indications from the federal provincial levels of how that might be able to be applied for emergency funding for those. So they're just being absorbed in our 23-24 actual expenditures, and if we recover something down the road, then hopefully we can use that funding for something else.
Any questions? Councillor Conklin.
Okay, so roads, curbs, and sidewalks, so those three parts of the transportation services, with our expenses for each category down significantly, because their overall budget really isn't that big. And I know that we've talked about it in the past about capacity issues with, having manpower to get a lot of these projects done. But I mean, that to me personally is a huge concern that we are not even able to spend $135,000 in, about $215,000 in those three categories in a fiscal year. I mean, we want to, we have a lot of sidewalk issues and curbing and just some general road maintenance. And I don't know. I don't know if there's an easy fix other than, expand our work crews or what have you, but the funding's there, and it is a very, very small piece of the pie, and we can't even use it up. We can't even spend that money. I guess that really wasn't a question, just a rant, sorry.
So I do think that there are, and certainly Matt might have more to add to this, but last year with the flooding, there was some injects into our normal maintenance season where we had to respond to those and use crews for stuff like that. So that would have impacted capacity because all of a sudden our priorities had to shift to address those issues. So we had some big stuff happen on Victoria Road that involved staff resources there with that closure and on King Street. And then it's the staff capacity, so you're correct. Some of it is more at the supervisory management level where we were down staff, so we've got more staff complement this year, and it's hoped, knock on wood or touch wood, that we don't have any events this year that would kind of take our resources into another direction, and that we're able to do that. But
I hope you didn't just jinx it right there.
I touched wood.
Yeah, that's got it. The expectation would be, barring any natural disasters,
right.
which this is not our year, we're not going to have any of those, that they would be able to complete all the projects that they've laid out in front of them, which as we know, we don't move forward with those, right? So between the funding that we have and the capacity that we have, we still don't fund enough to keep up. But we were hoping for some with the service exchange agreement. We were hoping for some changes with regarding roads and perhaps the province to take over some of that work and funding, but not quite. So. Did you have other items to go through now?
Anybody else?
Okay. Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, just a general question about the extraordinary items and due to the Hurricane Lee. So I'm assuming that money comes out of our reserves to cover that cost?
Well, it's essentially caught up in the surplus. Our
Okay.
surplus would have been greater had we not had
Okay.
those expenditures.
Okay. And then do we have to make application to the province or feds to see if we?
Historically, we have.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think probably within a week of the floods
Okay.
and hurricane, I forget which one came last.
Hurricane
Came
was
second.
last, yeah.
So within about a week of that, because there had been fires and floods and everything, there was an email asking us for our estimates of what we anticipated the repercussions of those things would be for us, as they would have sent out to all municipal units.
Right.
And that's the last communication that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right.
So they did request some early estimates.
Okay.
But
is it worth a follow-up to just
Yeah,
to
I
ask?
mean,
Or?
they may be relying on federal as well.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
It usually, this is not an unusual amount of time to
No.
wait for.
Okay.
For that.
I did receive a call from our member of parliament saying that he would advocate on our behalf, well, for all the municipalities in the South Shore regarding disaster funding, so I did
Okay.
just email him to say, we still don't have any more information, so he could hopefully rattle some chains and get things moving.
Yep.
Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, that was my question, part of it, but I think, Tammy, you said one time before that could take years to get your
Years.
money back. It's not an
Yeah.
automatic thing, you're gonna get a check in the mail once you do all your work.
Yeah.
Could take a considerable amount of
Yeah,
time.
I think the last time it was probably about 3 years, I believe.
I can't
But
remember
Dawn-
when Fiona was, but
Yeah.
I think we got information on making a claim in 2020 or 2021 after I had arrived,
Yeah.
long after the
Mhm.
event, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our costs were relatively insignificant for that, so.
Yes, it was, yeah.
So my point being, so don't sit around waiting for that check to come in the mail.
Yeah, there's usually a delay. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Coughlin, you had another question?
Traffic services, where are we, page 5? Okay, so lane marking is 23,000 over budget. Lane marking, that's like,
Street.
Street paving.
Okay.
Street lines.
so, okay, because if I recall, like that occurred over a long period of time. Like they did it in piecemeal, and some of that was like completed like in the fall.
Yeah,
2 years ago, I know, it was really, 2 years ago it was late. I can't remember last year being this late, but I remember 2 years ago, we were sitting around wondering
Is it going to happen?
where the lines went.
Yeah, and then, you know, like if you're getting the sidewalk or some of the crosswalks done in like September, October, I mean, they're just going to be like hardly visible after the winter season. But I can't even, I mean, I'm sure at one time, many years ago, we used to get all the lane marking done like over a span of a couple of days, maybe. I don't know.
I remember when lane marking used to last more than 1 year, but.
Okay, wow, all right.
So that point first, a lot of the towns and municipalities, it's an ongoing topic, that the lane markings do not last as long as they used to. And that may be a result of moving from style of paints, so oil-based paints to water-based paints.
Yeah,
So I know that was a recent correspondence that we've discussed in the engineering department. So not that was a question, I should highlight that, because we were talking, my wife and I, coming back, you can't see pavement markings on the highway anymore that it used to really reflect. So on how and when or schedule of the paint marking is subject to weather. So what I can say is that this year, with the abnormal amount of rain we received, it does cause the work to happen in piecemeal. So the roads have to be cleaned, of course, so we do have a good street sweeper, but those areas have to be cleaned and then they'll be painted. But yes, the previous year there was a lot more time from start to finish, to things that were still being done in late September. But we do try as staff to organize with the contractor. I think we've already been in contact with them to try to get them here as early as we can in the season, meaning spring, and then trying to have it complete before the start of school. That's our aim, is over 2 months, which allows for some weather delays.
Nice, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Parks and playgrounds on page 4, maybe, or 6. What are we with parks and playgrounds? About 86,000 under on the, to the good, I guess. So some of this, okay, so on, what are we looking? Less maintenance, less work or maintenance being required for parks year to date. So I do know, like, we do have at least 2 smaller size playgrounds, one off of Smith and the other one off of Brady, and they're in like really bad shape. The one in Smith, I think, is in the budget for this coming year. But again, here we have like unused monies, unused funds set aside that I guess at the end we're not able to use it to what it was intended for. And maybe that's going back to capacity issue again. Could also be with the weather events that we had too. But it's just kind of frustrating seeing these little things that we can't really get completed, but I know it's a lot of uncontrollable variables, but yeah, it's just kind of frustrating. Sorry, that wasn't a question. Okay.
It's all right.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? We're going to dive into budget in a minute, so now you can circle back with questions about this year.
Just on the playground thing, Jessica just advised me that the playground equipment is ordered for the Pine Street, Smith Street playground. So there's some delay in getting the equipment, which may be part of what you're referring to, the condition of the playground equipment. So there's some plans to do some work there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, if there's not further questions, is someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell, thank you.
Move the town council for the town of Bridgewater receive the third quarter financial report for 2023-24 from the Director of Finance as submitted in document 24-063.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We're almost at budget. We are doing the amendments to Chapter 24 sewer bylaw.
Right, so this is the first notice about the amendments to Chapter 24 Public Sewer Bylaw, and it's a result of our discussions around the budget and setting the sewer rates going into the fiscal year 24-25. So as a result of those discussions, Council has asked staff to add the following categories: long-term care facilities, so we can have a separate sewer rate for those; educational institutions, car wash and ancillary car wash, large grocery stores, large industrial, and then also the discussion we had about single unit residential properties that have a small home-based business within them that were getting charged both residential and commercial sewer charges. So it's really just one section, 28 subsection 2, that's requiring these categories to be added so that we can have separate sewer rates. Previously, there was just one commercial, basically other commercial category that kind of captured everything that wasn't specifically identified within the bylaw. I still think we could have separate rates, but it's better to tidy up the bylaw and add these categories so that when council makes a motion to set the rates, the bylaw matches that. And so as in doing that, that category was added to the section, but we also added to the definition section at the beginning of that bylaw a definition for large industrial and large grocery. Essentially with a bit of a description, large industrial being a wholly enclosed industrial building dedicated to the manufacturing, processing, and assembly of goods exceeding 10,000 square meters in gross floor area. In addition, we defined large grocery being a wholly enclosed commercial building in which food and drink is sold primarily for off-premise preparation and consumption, but may include on-site consumption exceeding 4,000 square meters. And so that just enables us to have a good definition so no one later questions what we intended by large grocery and large industrial. And so that, it's pretty well just a housekeeping process, but just tidies up those categories for now. Right now, that public sewer bylaw already permits consumption-based billing, so when we move that direction, we won't have to change the bylaw again. It actually permits 3 ways, based on assessed value, based on water consumption, and based on the fixed fee method that we're currently using. So it will permit it when we get there.
Councillor Cowan.
How do we determine the definition for large grocery? Like, how do we determine the size?
I consulted with our development officers to ensure that we were kind of consistent with planning documents.
Oh, okay.
Councillor McDonald.
This probably doesn't matter at all, but I noticed that they both say a wholly enclosed industrial building or commercial building. Does it matter if their operations are inside a building, or if some of them are happening like kind of in a yard or something?
I think the intent was not to capture people that were not, that say there was an event taking up a large outdoor space.
Ah, gotcha, okay.
The intention wasn't to capture.
Right, okay.
Say there was somehow, you could have food trucks somewhere in a big parking lot that were there. You wouldn't want to somehow capture someone
Mix
in
them into
this
that.
that wasn't intended to be.
Councillor Thurman.
Yeah, I think in the building report, we've seen a $22 million expansion. That certainly would, next year, would have to increase their costs for service.
That would be captured under large industrial, I believe.
Yeah, I believe you're right, but I think the percentage would be a little bit more than it is this year.
Yeah.
Right? So you're looking for a motion, Your Worship?
Yes, sir. By the way, I think we have some more questions.
Just one question. There's no issue legally in passing the budget tonight while having this in first read mode? Going into second? No? Okay.
No, you would.
Based on the definitions? Okay.
If you don't pass the bylaw, then we'll have to amend your budget approval to change those rates.
Perfect.
That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready? I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater hereby conduct first reading of the bylaw number 211, a bylaw to amend chapter 24, public sewer, attached in document number 24-067A, and give notice that at the May 13th, 2024 council meeting, town council will consider reading of the same.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Now we are down to 2024-2025 operating and capital budget.
Okay.
All right.
There we go. So at our meeting last week, council had their second review of the budget document. At that meeting, we did also include with your agenda the police commission budget as well as the LCLC budget, and those have been wrapped up into the overall budget document with the numbers there. At the meeting, council asked us to look at swapping out the Old Bridge and LaHave Street intersection improvements for the LaHave Victoria Road, Aberdeen Road intersection improvements there. So that's been reflected in the capital budget. And we also, we discussed the wastewater rate, at which time council asked us to look at changes to the large industrial and the hospital rate. So those have been reflected in the document you have tonight. So what I thought I would do tonight is just do a recap of the budget summary, a quick review of your capital budget, and then we can, and the rates, and then we can get into some questions if council has further questions. Perfect. So the operating budget is $32,020,535, and that's at 11%. I know it says 10, but it's an 11% increase. The capital budget is $8.356 million, and those numbers haven't changed from the last time. The tax rate remains the same as last year at $1.85 for $100 of assessment, and the same with the commercial rate. It remains at last year's rate at $4.07 for $100 of commercial assessment. And of course you have the LCLC special purpose tax, which remains in place at 6 cents per $100. The wastewater rates were as discussed, and we do have a slide a little later that shows you the comparison to the existing rates, but the proposed rates are shown on the slide at $518 for residential and $466 per additional dwelling unit. So when you have multiple units, the additional rate would apply to each unit. Hotels at $1,109 plus $100 per guest bed or guest unit. Hospital, that's been changed to reflect the most recent discussions of council, so $19,000 plus $100 per patient bed, which I believe brings that out to around $26,000.
$26,000.
Yeah. And large industrial has been changed to $45,000. And educational, large grocery and car wash is proposed at $4,000, and commercial and others are at $1,109 plus $998 per additional user. And we do have some rates for sewer connections that are outside of the town, and we'll show those on another slide. So through your budget, you're implementing all of the strategic priorities that council has directed during their recent strategic priorities session that you held back in January. So as highlights, Exit 12A is a big focus of our capital budget this year. So there's $5 million in this capital budget, but overall, for the total project over the last few years, it's a $16 million investment. This year, we'll see the development plan, marketing, and sales prep, and there's $35,000 in our budget to see that through. And we're working on the clean fuel feasibility assessment work with the province and Clean, and we are looking at an expense of $150,000, but it's important to note that there's a grant to offset the majority of that cost. So our net is $23,000 for that work. Investments in infrastructure are obvious within our capital budget. Wastewater is dominant in our capital budget and in our 10-year capital plan as well. So this year there's approximately $5.1 million of wastewater infrastructure proposed. Road upgrades, there's $920,000 of work there. So we have Empire Street and Pearl Street being having some pavement work completed. And then there's your general pavement management program. I would also note that there's going to be some work on St. Philip Street as we look at the water and sewer line there. So there'll be some paving as part of that project. That's not reflected in this number. Sidewalks, there's $140,000 for sidewalk maintenance. And then we have the investment attraction marketing work. That's going to help support growth. The Bridgewater Memorial Arena, we continue to work on that this year, and there's $90,000 in the budget to look at the exterior of the building and some improvements to the material. And Energize Bridgewater continues this year at $1.62 million in operating, and that is offset by our Smart Cities grant. In terms of placemaking and quality of life, there's the accessibility coordinator that will work with the town at the development of the accessibility action plan and the implementation of that. There is the ongoing implementation of the active transportation plan, and we have High Streets multimodal trail being developed this year, so that's part of the High Street work that you'll see from Victoria to Empire. There's investment in recreational facilities this year is $1.55 million, and that is in our operating. So the LCLC is a component of that, as well as our parks and our outdoor pool. Housing action plan implementation, and we just received a report from students that were doing some work for us, but staff will be implementing the housing action plan. A little slower than anticipated without the Housing Accelerator Fund monies, but still within our work plan. And the work through Energize Bridgewater at reducing energy poverty continues. And this year we will be partnering on a regional anti-racism, inclusion, and diversity committee and developing a plan for the town. The museum continues to be invested in, and our operating grant is $203,000 for the museum. And we continue to invest in transit, so that's $320,000 in costs, but our net is $248,000 once we take out our fare box revenue in sponsorships and advertising. Community events, there's $92,700 for community events. So that is Canada Day, Christmas on LaHave, the Harvestman Festival, which is proposed to continue this year, and Music on the Riverbank. And in addition to that, we have a lot of celebrations this year with our Bridgewater 125 birthday. So there's $62,000 in additional initiatives in terms of celebration activities. And with some funding that we've received, that nets our cost down to $38,000. Supports for nonprofit organizations, the budget contains $210,000 for that. So that comes in the form of grants at $45,000, sponsorships at $42,500, and then property tax exemptions at $132,000, which have the same effect as a grant in terms of the impact on our budget. And then there's low-income property tax exemptions, and that's $70,000. Pro Kids, we have $20,000 in our budget in support of Pro Kids, so the town will be funding $11,500, and that is an increase from last year. So we had recommended to council that we increase that this year, and donations will be $8,500 of that. The Community Navigator has some proposed funds in the budget for activities related to physician recruitment, and she has been successful at obtaining a grant, which nets our cost down to zero for that. But we do have to show the expense, and we also show the revenue. And investment in emergency response, this year fire is at $1.8 million. And the new thing there is the fire services review that we'll be doing. So that's the underwriter's review as well as a review of fire services to determine what level of fire services is required for a community growing as Bridgewater is. Police protections, our net cost is $4.3 million. And REMO, or emergency response, is $52,000, and that cost is up to help offset some additional resource required to support REMO. And this year we have the new park preservation project, the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid project, and that's $158,109, and we are applying for funding to offset some of those costs. In terms of ensuring fiscal responsibility, we continue to contribute to reserves, and this year we'll see $1.35 million go into the wastewater reserve. And from a review of our capital plan, our 10-year capital plan, we need, if that's needed. Sourcing grants, this year we have $2.8 million showing as capital grants and $3.35 million in operating grants that are noted. So smart cities would be a big part of the operating grant piece there. Asset management plan and program, there's $135,000 to see that get off the ground this year. Fraud risk assessment, we will be bringing those results in the implementation of that forward. We continue to implement the internal control improvements that were recommended by our auditors a few years ago, so there's $10,000 for that. Development and infrastructure charges, been carried forward for a few years, but this year we hope to see some responses to our proposal calls so that we can see that work completed. And ensuring debt affordability, this year you'll see that we are increasing our funding of capital from operating to $2.3 million, and usually it's around the $1.3 million range. So we're suggesting that we fund more of that capital from operating, which lessens the amount that we have to borrow. And as Kim noted during our previous budget discussions, next year we anticipate some new debt costs coming on board. And so what that'll mean is that that extra that we're able to fund from capital from operating will go to debt payments next year, and will bring us back down to our normal 1.2 million in capital from operating. In terms of organizational excellence, internal control measures, again, a recommendation from our auditors when they did the internal control work at the time and attendance software. So there's $130,000 in the budget for that. Budgeting software that will enable us to I guess, improve the budgeting process, but also look at long-range operating plans the same way we do with capital. And regional building inspection services, there's $85,000 carried over for that. And then data governance and privacy management. So the town's funding that cost at $140,000, and that includes the IT portion from the Municipal Joint Services Board, as well as salary costs for the position. And then we are doing some recruitment and retention initiatives. So there's the strategy implementation of that, so $15,000 to look at recruitment and retention initiatives and implement them. And then there's the remuneration review, which is part of your salary admin policy to do that review every 4 years. And this is your operating budget summary that shows you your budget compared to last year. And we're not allowed to budget for a deficit, so we're budgeting for a balanced budget with that. As I indicated, it's an 11% increase, and your revenues are also up 10% to help offset that. This shows you where your tax dollars go, and we've kind of gone over that, but it gives you an idea of where some of the big, I guess, ticket holders are in terms of costs. So police, engineering, water, we've got admin, and then parks, rec, and mandatory contributions, and it kind of goes from there. But it gives you an idea, if you were to slice it up, where some of the bigger costs are. And this is your revenue and where your revenue comes from. So 85% of your revenue is tax revenue. And then we have smaller amounts that come in for conditional and unconditional transfers, so grants. Some, as we noted last meeting, have conditions attached, so we have to spend it on what the grant's for, and others are unconditional, meaning that there's no restrictions on that. Sale of services would be like our police criminal records checks, those types of things. And revenue from owned sources, there's 2% there, so interest on income or on our monies in our reserve accounts and those types of things. So now we're just going to flip to, as I get there. We went through the additions on the previous meetings, and certainly we're prepared to answer any questions that council may have with respects to that. I thought we would kind of go to the operating reserve budget, which just shows you your balances. So there's money coming in to the operating reserve, and brackets would be money that is coming out. So you can see that we've, starting the year, estimated at 16.7 million. And we'll have some stake go in, and with some bigger pieces coming out for the business park at 3.5, and then 1.2 from the undesignated operating reserve to fund initiatives, and 600,000 for smart cities. So that would be getting the grant before the expenditures happen. We place it in reserve and we pull it out to fund later. So it's a $12.2 million balance is what we're estimating at the end of this coming fiscal year, March 31st, 2025. And then your capital reserves are shown there. So your gas tax, your other capital project funding that you have. So you have a balance starting out at 3.8, 675 going in, gas tax, and then you have funding coming out to fund capital projects, and you have interest income. So that takes you to 3.5, and then we're paying ourselves back for money we borrow from ourselves, and so that brings you down to 3.4 million. That will end the year with. This shows you your 10-year capital budget based on categories. So it gives you an idea of our total over the 10 years. So if we go to 2033, 34, the total is a big number at $146 million. And you can see where some of those big categories are. Wastewater at 79.6 million. Then you've got engineering, which would be roads, streets, sidewalks, facilities at 30.4 million. And then your next big one is police. So there's some plans in future years to address the police station. And understanding, of course, there's some discussion that has to happen with council and some decisions that have to be made. But that's based on what we foresee at this point. So the 10-year capital budget is a plan. So what you're approving officially is the capital budget for 24-25. The rest are all, it's a plan, and it is subject to change. There's lots of things that can happen over the next 10 years that cause that to change. This is your capital budget in terms of the cost and the funding sources. So as indicated earlier, your capital budget is 8.3 million, and then here's the funding sources for that. So capital from operating, 2.3, gas tax, we got 2.8 in grants, debt financing, so we're borrowing 1.4 million, capital reserves, we're using 48,000, and then operating reserves, we're using $1 million. So that's how we're funding the capital budget this year. And as noted, the debt financing requirement is low this year compared to future years. So your wastewater rate, as I indicated, this is the slide that shows you what we have in 23-24 and what the proposed rates are. So you can see where those increases are. And the additional sewer, additional commercial sewer, the additional long-term care home units, and then we've got the hospital at 19,000. And then the next increase is the education, grocery, and car wash at 4,000, and then large industrial at 45. And then for municipal sewer, so that would be sewer connections outside of the town boundary, the residential is increasing to 673, and the additional units are at the same amount. And then commercials at 1,422. So that's your budget at a quick high-level summary from the last two meetings, and certainly if there are any questions, we will answer those for you.
All right, let's open it up to questions from members of council. I know we've reviewed it a couple of times, but I'm sure there's a few questions from folks. Councilor Conklin.
Just curious, let's say we had a crystal ball and last year we knew that we'd be having this type of surplus, so we factored it into our budget for last year, and we were basically netting out, breaking even right now. What impact would that have had on our tax rate?
If we wouldn't have the surplus? Some of that's harder to adjust because we had staff vacancies, which are really hard to project, and maintenance costs are hard to project, so I don't know that we could have done that. We do know, and I don't have it right here, but about $90,000 is 1 cent on the tax rate, just to give you a...
Okay, yeah, I think, like last year, I think it was around 87,000 or 88 or something.
Yeah.
So it's gone up a bit. Gotcha, okay. Yeah.
So yes, it would be. However, some of it is timing related that we couldn't have anticipated.
Yeah.
And additional revenue.
Additional revenue sources, interest on bank accounts, and transfer tax that really can't be counted on.
Yeah, no, I understand. I know, it's just kind of tough.
We definitely don't want to come to you and say
taxes
we're $1 million
10 cents
short at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor Frazier.
Yeah, just looking at the chart for debt affordability and projected debt ratios, 25, 26 has a projection of 12.9%. And is that, I guess, based on us attaining any grants, or is that without grants?
So that 12.9%, so keeping in mind that we have a $33.9 million capital project carry forward, so while our budget for 24-25 is only $8 million.
Right.
Remember, we have almost $34 million being carried forward, and then the debt component of that we'd be borrowing it in 24-25, and the debt repayment would start in 25-26.
So
that's really what's
big
reflected to make that
Okay.
increase.
Yeah, and in terms of going forward, the budget has some assumptions with respect to
Okay.
grant funding as well. So there's, and if those aren't realized, then we will be coming back to council to have a conversation about building out our capital plan many more years in terms of addressing our wastewater issue.
Okay.
So we're hopeful that we'll see that funding
Yeah,
material.
and I know you tried to project on a realistic projection, and that, yeah, you're conservative with your numbers, so thank you.
Yeah, so it assumes some grants, but hopefully not the only grants.
Yeah.
Because some of these go into territory that we just can't go into. So we'll see. Other questions? Councillor Conklin?
Thanks. With respect to the LCLC budget, EV car chargers. So, we're looking at an total expense of about 90,000 with a grant of 45. So that'd be on the last for their capital budget, capital projects. So the grant is 45, and then we're making up the difference between us and our partner there, Modal. Is that a free service, and will it be will we continue to pay for EV charging there?
So right now, the charges that were set up originally are no charge. Going forward, they would be pay stations, so there would actually be a revenue component.
Gotcha.
So good.
Okay.
Great question. So no, going forward, they will definitely be pay per use.
All right, thanks.
And I think our math was it's a positive revenue stream as well for the facility.
Another question with respect to the LCLC. On the revenue side, looks like there is a good stream of revenue coming in advertising and sponsorship, which I don't think the facility really experienced in the past. Last year, the total sponsorship and advertising received was about 25,000, I guess. So I'm just wondering, where is that revenue being generated from?
Yeah, she has four event sponsors budgeted, so she's targeting to have more of that.
Gotcha. Okay, and the arena rentals, it looks like that the budget forecast for revenue for next year is quite a bit higher than, I guess, what we did this year in revenue, going from 338 to 388. And it looks like the LCLC is going to be like in limited capacity, operational capacity, June, July, and August. Because the revenue forecast for those 3 months is just like 8,500. So I guess what I'm wondering, like, where is that revenue increase coming from? Like, are we anticipating more hours booked, or are we doing a rate increase?
It's a rate increase, so it's proposed that prime ice would increase, as well as the non-prime ice rate would increase as well. So she's got those proposed in there to, and looking at what market rates are around, so we have to be cognizant of that as well. But there is a proposal to increase those.
All right.
That would offset that. And the summer rentals aren't actually as high as, I think.
Not as high as expected when we decided to move to summer ice.
Yeah, I would agree. But actually, last year there was we had about 25,000 in revenue in August. So that would have been just from hockey camps.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess we're not really having much go on this summer. Are they doing repairs or something, or?
No, I mean, yes and no. It's shut down. They're doing some work at the end of May or end of June.
Earlier than August.
Yeah, it's like I think it's I want to say June. Having something done, but I think I think there was an expectation that there would be multiple groups booking. The indication we got when we decided should we move to summer ice or not was there was a plethora of groups looking for summer ice, and my understanding is that did not materialize. So, which is unfortunate. Now, maybe after there is ice in this summer, those groups will come back and say, yes, we're up for next year, but we're committed for this year because we have renters that have signed contracts. So,
okay,
territory.
So, other question, if I may. So the aquatic center, we're looking at an increase in revenue. Would that be similar then? We're looking at increasing rates? Or, so last year we did,
Yeah.
or the LCLC did, 240
Yeah.
roughly?
So there is a proposed rate increase budgeted starting in September, and then there's this member benefit discount that you get if you're a member, and it's 50%, and they're looking at decreasing that discount to 30%. So that will result in more revenue in the aquatic center.
Gotcha, okay. And one other question. Okay, so we're looking at increasing some rates on ice. What about like room rentals for other, just, what else do we have on the revenue side there?
We got room equipment rentals.
Memberships are changing as well, so there'll be an increase in revenue from memberships.
I think those were the big ones that she noted was memberships, the aquatic rate and the ice rental rate. The other ones I think were small in amounts.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good questions. Other questions on any of the items in the budget? I should note, since you brought up the subject of the EV car charger at the LCLC, that those are turned off now, and as people would know, they're old and they've been kind of dying a slow and painful death, but they're off right now, and I'm not sure if they'll be coming back on in the foreseeable future. I'm looking at Mark, but I don't know. Anyway, so they're off now. Gotcha. Quiet group. Well, we had we had a long meeting last week, so lots on the table last week. Councillor Thorburn.
I think at the last meeting, we debated quite a bit, and we made some significant changes to charges on different things. So I think we started earlier. Staff has done an excellent job in providing us with the pertinent information we needed to make the decisions that we did. And it's certainly a far cry when I started 12 years ago. We went line by line and spent hours and hours. I mean, the staff's been so great to work with, and it just shows in this document how much work was put in by the different department heads, and certainly a CEO in the finance department. So, great job by all.
Thank you, Councillor Thorburn. Other comments? Councillor McDonald.
Like Councillor Thorburn said, this is my 12th budget too, which is a little bit crazy. But I found that in this budget, I had more people reach out with input than in any past budget. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank people who took the time to reach out to one of us or participate in the surveys or come to a Talk Bridgewater. The feedback is so helpful when we're sitting here and we're a little bit unsure if we're making assumptions. That feedback really helps us feel comfortable that we have, that we're moving in the right direction and meeting the needs and wants of the community. And I also I wanted to acknowledge that it doesn't seem like very long ago that approving $1 million expenditure or project seemed huge, and now we're throwing around numbers like $16 million. And the growth and the opportunities have been incredible, but more incredible has been the staff's ability to step up to the unprecedented challenges that we've seen along with that growth and some of the exceptional natural disasters and floods and all of those other things that have been thrown at them. You guys make it look easy, and I know it's not, so thank you for all the work that you do that the rest of us don't see. I know it's huge, and you make it look easy somehow, so thank you.
Other comments from Deputy Mayor Fisher?
Again, I'd like to thank staff, our CEO, Tammy Crowder. Again, we start early in the budget deliberations. They bring it to the table early. I know staff start way back before, probably in the fall. And with us having the quarterly updates from, like yourself, tonight. The Director of Finance, thanks. Thank you for doing that, because those quarterly updates keep us informed what we're on track for, surplus expenses and so on. The details are very much appreciated in the time that goes into that. And as Councillor McDonald mentioned about the public's input is invaluable, and we appreciate residents giving us comments at Talk Bridgewater or reaching out one-on-one. That's certainly any time of the year is very much appreciated. And yeah, so it's my 8th year on council, and I know it's not difficult. I know it's not easy, but staff make it seem easier for council to go through. We've got it down to a science, I think. Each year brings more challenges, and making sure we're fiscally responsible and as well as transparent. So kudos to the staff for doing this year's budget.
Let's go.
I don't think I had any questions tonight, because this has been the process of many months, and many hours by staff and hours by council as well. So I'm happy we've reached this point, and what I'm most happy about is that we're able to maintain the tax rates without raising them, despite some quite significant challenges, and we managed to do that. So that's what I'm most pleased about tonight.
Councillor Tanner.
This will be my last budget with the town of Bridgewater. I'm quite concerned about how future councils will deal with future budgets, particularly because of the increased cost of debt servicing, and our only real revenue source being taxation. I fear you're going to those that are returning are going to have to look at increased taxes to accommodate it. I think the only hope is that Exit 12A development happens sooner rather than later, and somehow the province and Fed step up, despite promises that perhaps haven't materialized. I truly feel, and I made the comment earlier, we're being penalized for being proactive. I often wonder, what would happen if we weren't proactive and we just let sewers back up and so on? Would the feds and the provincial government step in and help us out, like they have with some of our neighbors, perhaps, but obviously that's the wrong thing to do. And I do feel like going forward, and I think we've seen a little bit of it, that you're going to be sacrificing road work and sidewalks and parks and some of those things in the future, to honestly just get by and service the cost of some of these high debts that we're going to be experiencing. So anyway, I wish you all the best, those of you who may be returning. And again, thanks to the CAO and finance for wrangling all this together and putting together a nice, beautiful package with a lovely bow. So thank you.
Councillor Colgan, any words of?
Well, I guess to kind of echo what Councillor Tanner mentioned, how we are kind of getting penalized for being proactive. So, yeah, sure, if we can't even spend 60 grand a year on fixing sidewalks now, like, what's going to happen? And, if we don't get help from the federal or provincial government and some of these huge projects, I mean, really, it's going to make me think that, is it worth plowing ahead and jacking our tax rates up just to service whatever type of debts we'll be incurring just to get these projects done? I mean, really, it's kind of crazy, but that's kind of how it is. I don't know. It just feels like we're fighting the battle by ourselves. That we're not. Maybe we are getting support from behind the scenes, but I'm not seeing it. So it'd be nice if our MLAs and MPs and whoever else out there has any type of access to any government funding. Tammy's phone number's in the book. Give her a call. And our mayor is always on Facebook. Thank you, Kim, for the budget. Well done. And our CAO, thanks, Tammy. That is it for me.
Thank you. It's, yeah, so obviously, thank you to Kim and her staff and all the senior management team for many long hours and many very difficult discussions. I know it's easier when you're on the outside and you just look at a couple of numbers and you think those are big numbers, and perhaps you don't like those numbers. And municipal government is so different. We can't run a deficit. So unlike other orders of government who can just say, this year didn't work, we're short by $1 billion, let's just set that aside and do it again and do it again. We don't have that luxury. The other is that the taxpayers, of which we are all taxpayers in the town of Bridgewater, you know, the expectation is that your revenue sources are not going to, like your tax rate isn't going to be so large that you're just pumping back massive surpluses, because that means you've overtaxed people. So you have to run these kind of razor thin budgets. Now, I know we have a large surplus this year, but it is, you know, again, as the Director of Finance said, some of that was unexpected increase in revenue, and some of it was a decrease in expenses. So, you know, kudos to staff for that. But also it has to go into surplus because, to Councillor Tanner's point, we have, you know, massive costs coming up, massive capital costs. And we can't put 100% of that into wastewater. We do have to do sidewalks, and we do have to do roads, and we can't sacrifice parks and playgrounds and recreation and arts and culture. All these things have to be able to still fit in the budget. And it does require the federal and provincial governments to step up. Now, I'm quite confident in discussions that we have that will materialize. But this is a 10+ year timeline. And when you look at those debt servicing costs, when they start getting up to 17%, it's impossible. And so as much as the charts show that, that's where we would be heading. To me, we just can't. We have to, there has to be more funding. There should be a reward for being proactive. This is not unlike back in 2008, 2009, back when we acquired Leon as a consultant to do our sustainability plan. And we had this very robust plan that was put together because that was the only way a municipality in this province could get its gas tax funding. While many other of our neighbors, not our direct neighbors, but our colleagues, basically copied and pasted a sustainability plan from some other jurisdiction, submitted it, got their gas tax funding. You didn't have to submit it every year, you just had to do it once. And you didn't even have to enact it. But since that day, you know, Leon was a consultant, we hired Leon, and I'm just using him as an example, a lot of things, a lot of incredible positive momentum has been built from that sustainability plan. Came the ICIP, from that we've got Energize Bridgewater, we're taking people out of energy poverty. All this stuff happened from that decision, but it cost money and we were proactive. And it's the same with, you know, because you asked the question earlier, is it that other towns don't have the wastewater capacity? Well, if we hadn't done the studies and asked the questions, then we'd just be dumping into the river and we could be just building everything we wanted, which is not the right thing to do. And one of the issues I had with some of the, I'm going to try to temper my words, with some of the announcements being made are for, well, you can have this funding to do this study, or there's funding available for you to plan what this might look like, versus the funding we need, which is, if we can literally do this, then we can build an apartment building. Right? You want 200 more units of affordable housing? Well, we have to change a pump station or change a pipe. We don't need to study what the future might look like of this design or that design. We know what we need. But that proactive approach has not translated yet. So, but I do have some confidence. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I do have some confidence that will materialize, because I do think that the proactive approach does lead to some recognition that Bridgewater is doing the right thing. It's why we have so many people knocking at our door for Exit 12A. It's why Michelin chose to expand in this market, because this was not their only option for expansion. It's not even like it was their only one of a dozen. They could have, there's lots of plants that probably could have received this expansion, but it's all these things in conjunction with the other things all together that I think is why I'm more confident with the funding. So it's a very long-winded, as always with budget, for me to say thank you again to staff and council. We all we did talk Bridgewater and engaged with the public, and no doubt we will continue to engage with the public as we go forward. I'd like to thank all those who have just said that they're not going to be returning to council. Budgets aren't easy, but you've put in the work, and I appreciate that. So obviously, as the motion gets made, I will be supporting a budget that has no tax rate increases, and I appreciate that as well. So thank you for indulging me in my long-winded rant. All right, Councilor Thorburn.
I will make the motion in a second, but I think this is my last year as Andrew sitting here, but the numbers that you see here tonight are the accumulation of a lot of time and effort. Now, I just want to acknowledge the volunteer fire department that started this budget back in August, September, goes to the general, goes to the crew, goes to the officers, and finally they present a budget to the town of Bridgewater. It's not an easy thing, and Michael is a department head, and I want to thank the fire department for what they do to make this budget a success. Some painful cuts had to be made along the way. It's not very easy, even for the volunteers. So, on a motion?
Yes, but thank you as well for your 12 budgets.
Okay.
12 budgets, that's a lot
That's a lot of
for
budgets.
both of you. That's a lot.
Anyway, I would move that town council.
Sorry, we have one correction on that.
Okay.
So the operating budget, where it says 31,991,586, should say what the number is that's on the screen
The
there.
second number on the screen, 32,020,535.
32 million?
Yeah, so that just reflects some of the sewer reserve transfers we did with the increased rates
535
in the last meeting.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And thank you, Councilor Thorburn, if you'd like to make that motion.
Yeah, I would move that town council of the town of Bridgewater approve the capital budget in the amount of $8,356,000, with the funding, including the reserve transfers as presented in document 24-026 final. Approve the operating budget in the amount of $32,020,535 with revenue and expenditures. Oh, that doesn't make sense. $32,020,535, including the reserve transfers as presented in document 24-026 final.
Yep.
Okay. 3, set the 2024-2025 commercial tax rate at $4.07 per $100 of assessment. 4, set the 2024-25 residential tax rate at $1.85 per $100 of assessment. And 5, set the special purpose tax rate, commercial and residential, for the payment of the debenture principal and interest for the Lunenburg County Multipurpose Center at 0.6 cents per $100 of assessment.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Tanner. We've had a good discussion. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next motion for the sewer charges. Deputy Mayor Frazier?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll make the motion. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater set the 2024-25 annual sewer charges for properties in the Town of Bridgewater connected to the public sewer of the town as follows. Residential and land lease communities, $518 for one dwelling unit, plus $466 for each additional dwelling unit. Hotels, motels, base charge of $1,109, plus $100 for each guest unit. Hospitals, base charge of $19,000 plus $100 for each patient bed. Long-term care facility, base charge of $518 plus $328 per patient bed. Large industrial, $45,000. Educational, car wash, ancillary car wash, and large grocery at $4,000. Other commercial, shopping centers, institution, and industrial users for first users, $1,109 plus $998 for each additional unit. And the town council for the town of Bridgewater set the 2024-25 annual sewer charges for properties within the municipality of the District of Lunenburg connected to the sewage collection system in Headville as follows. The resident and land lease communities a per unit charge of $673. Commercial shopping centers, institutional and industrial users a per unit charge of $1,442.
Seconder, Councillor Conklin. Ready for the question on that? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And is someone prepared to make the final motion? Councillor Tanner.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater, in accordance with policy 92, shall generate the interim tax bills for the fiscal year 2024-2025 with the current year's taxable assessment and the 2024-25 tax and sewer rates as approved by council at its meeting of April 8th, 2024. And the interim tax bill shall be due on Friday, May 31st, 2024. That final tax bill for fiscal year 2024-25 shall become due on Friday, September 27th, 2024. And the interest on overdue accounts be set at 12% per annum, charged at 1% per month.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you to staff again for lots of hard work, and to council for that. So we do have an in-camera meeting to discuss property matters. Sorry. Contract matters under Section 22(2)A and 22(2)E of the Municipal Government Act. Can I now have a motion to adjourn? Deputy Mayor Frazier, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. We are adjourned. Thank you.